Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the Nika Fanfics. Back with amazing fanfiction. This is the series of What If Deku Had Fate Stay Gaming Quirk. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. Introduction. Hi, this should be the first page in this notebook if it works how I think it does. I am Midoriya Izuku, and this is my analysis of all the friends, foes, and allies I've come across to this very day. If you are able to read this, then I have already revealed my best-kept secrets to you, and I have allowed you to get a look at everyone I've ever met from my perspective. This first page is to run through all of the terminology, systems, and where every topic is located. Important vocabulary. Strength, the measurement of how powerful someone, or something, is in terms of raw physical might. Graded on a scale from D to SSS, with D being the lowest and equivalent to barely being able to break though plywood, and SSS being equivalent to effortlessly bend titanium. Agility, how fast someone, or something, is able to move while in combat. Graded on a scale from D to SSS. Anyone with a speed rated D is able to move slightly faster than a normal human sprint speed, while SSS is able to bypass the mathematical equation for the speed of light, EMC superscript 2. Endurance, how long someone is able to last under continuous strain, or how many attacks a person is capable of taking head-on. Graded from D to SSS. D is equivalent to a regular human, while SSS is equal to the proto-adamantite alloy, a lab-made metal made of titanium, orichalcum, and bound with diamond threads. Stamina, the limit of a person's body, mentally and physically, interchangeable with endurance. Graded from D to infinity. D is the average for normal humans, infinity is just unlimited energy. Element, the affinity tied to a Magi's magecraft, fire, water, wind, etc. Magecraft, spells used by Magi that bend our reality in order to exist in it, see associated pages. Quirk, a biological ability approximately 80% of the Earth's population wields. Formerly referred to as meta-abilities, those born with one are able to use powers once only seen in fiction in their daily lives. Strategizing, the measurement of one's ability to take note of a situation and come up with a thought-out plan in an instant. Graded from D to S+. Due to this being a more subjective topic, readers will need to gain insight into how it is graded from finished analysis. More information on materials located on XX. More information on magecraft located on XX. More information on quirks located on XX. Next page. Amiya Shiro. This is a coded notebook meant to keep my thoughts and analytical skills sharp after some encouragement from Lord Elmeloy Sensei. This first volume will feature my analysis of training enemies I have fought against and anyone since then. Amiya Shiro. Magus. This was my first opponent, a hard light projection that formed into a boy around my age. It took a little bit until I could figure out how his powers worked, but in the end I realized that he was combining his prowess for projection and reinforcement to attack. What surprised me the most was when Sensei told me about how his circuits were weak. Fighting against Amiya-san proved that he wasn't weak whatsoever. Due to the fact that I was learning the foundations of Magus society and the general basics, on top of the training I underwent, I was able to figure out a way to trick Amiya-san into misfiring one of his projected blades and attacking then. Just as I was about to finish the fight, however, the area I was in suddenly changed and showed a large field full of swords. Before any more could happen, Sensei cut off the hard light projector and stopped the fight, declaring me the winner. I don't know how to feel about that, since it was clear that Amiya could still battle for a lot longer. Using my experience in the multitude of scraps I've had with him, and with the need to rank his abilities and fighting prowess from Lord Elmeloy, I have decided to give the following to Amiya Shiro. Strength, C, despite his ability to leave a dent in the bark of a tree, which is still crazy that he did that, compared to others I have witnessed before and after, the power behind his attacks is nothing special. Endurance, B+. Amiya's ability to take hits that would put most normal people out of commission and get up like nothing happened is insane. In one of the more advanced forms of training a few weeks before I left the clock tower, he was able to tank a direct hit from an enemy Magus that left a sizable crater in the ground prior. Not to mention, using his reinforcement spell he was able to block a literal cannonball to his chest with minimal damage. In a battle of attrition, he would be a force to be reckoned with. Stamina, B-. He might be able to stand up and be perfectly fine after a cannonball to the chest, but he is still human. Despite this fact, it took a long time for Amiya-san to tire out. He clearly has trained for a long time, but I doubt he would be able to match up to the likes of Japan's top 10 heroes. If I had to give an example of where he'd match up, I would say he's on par with the likes of an Olympic sprinter. He has the stamina to go long distances, but he seems more built for short bursts. Element, sword. After my initial battle with him ended, I used the resources within the personal library I was permitted to find out more about Amiya Shiro. Apparently, just like how heroes keep major details about their quirks private, Magus do the same. I should have expected that, but I had just gotten my chest kicked in at the time. From the information I could find, he seems to only specialize in one element, being sword. I couldn't find much information on how exactly it functioned, but seeing as how he literally created swords out of thin air, I have a general idea. Magecraft, specialized projection, reinforcement. Pretty self-explanatory for what they do, but I couldn't find many examples for how he uses the former other than to create blades that hurt like hell. Quirk, I don't know what his quirk is, if he even has one. Strategizing, C+, changed from D. Initially, I thought he was incapable of strategizing effectively due to how he kept running toward me and attacking despite it not working, but after fighting further I realized that he was attempting to use the simplicity of his attacks to lure me into a false sense of security. Taken from the disappointing glare I received from Sensei, and the open cut under my eye as I write this. Despite how he may come across, do not underestimate Amiya. He is extremely dangerous when he realizes you've fallen into his trap. In conclusion, Amiya is a dangerous combatant and very powerful in his own right. As I am writing this, I am witnessing him completely run circles around one of my cocky senpais. Despite his weaknesses, he makes up for them with quick-witted actions and his generally superior stamina and endurance to whittle down his enemies' defenses. To be fair, this is only a projection of him made by the admins of the clock tower, so with that in mind I have to admit that he gave me a very hard time. Ending this off, Sensei told me that if I ever returned then he would allow the projected Amiya to use his reality marble. I learned very little about what it was, but from what I did learn, reality marbles are an incredible power, far beyond anything else but the most powerful in the world. When I become stronger I definitely want to see what it's capable of with my own eyes. Next pay, Kuruda Hadeshire. I don't know why, but for some reason this notebook, which is a Mystic Code Sensei commissioned for me, seems to organize my entries in a specific order. I put it down after titling this page, and now it transferred this to right after my first entry. I'll need to experiment more, but Sensei did mention that it has infinite pages and is somehow connected to Sage. Right now, it's not important, but eventually. Kuruda Hadeshire. Hero student. Kuruda-kun was my first friend at UA, even though he seemed a little eccentric when we first met. After hanging around him for a while I got to know his true self. Even now, about a week into the hero course curriculum, I still don't know exactly how his quirk works, but I plan to get to the bottom of it. During our first training session during class, I got to fight him and saw a decent bit of his attacks and got a decent idea of his quirk's basics. To be honest, the fight didn't even go right because of Kaken Katsuki interrupting the fight and decimating the building with his gauntlets. Luckily no one was seriously injured, but our teacher didn't even do anything about the fact he almost killed 3 of his classmates. This is turning out to be just like. For Kuruda Hadeshire, his rankings are as follows. Strength, B+. Kuruda is strong, really strong. He was able to not only punch through concrete while he was, in his own words, holding back, but he was able to throw the ball in our quirk assessment test 852.5 meters. If that doesn't say anything, then nothing will. I assume his quirk enhances his strength like mine, but I don't know to what degree. Agility, A. He gets a flat A in agility because of how slippery he is in a fight. He was able to avoid almost every blow of mine when we fought, but even when one did hit he got right back up like nothing happened. I was holding back, especially since I didn't want to hurt him too badly, but it was still impressive considering I punched a tree and its stump into literal atoms. I still don't believe that was real. No way in hell did that actually happen, right? Stamina, S-. There is only one reason why I don't give his stamina a flat S, and that is because he can still tire out, just not as easily as an average person. If I were to go back and add the entries of my previous journals, which I should soon, only about 15 total heroes would receive an S with this rating system. Even though the ranks are arbitrary at the end of the day, it still astonishes me how so many people have ratings this high, like what the hell? Element, NA. I'm not sure if this will stay the same later on, because something about the way his quirk works is just off. Magecraft, NA. Quirk, Bakaniko. It turns him into the yokai by the same name. Apparently he developed the same tendencies as the creature, giving him his theatrical personality, and it also gave him his signature tail and ears. They are genuinely so fluffy. Kuruda-kun let me touch his ears once, and I felt like I was in heaven. I don't know anything else about it, other than the fact it gives him superhuman strength, speed, stamina, and endurance. Strategizing, B. Kuruda is a really good tactician, something that I learned firsthand. I wouldn't say he's perfect, but can put together a decent plan. Which just makes me worry more. I picked his brain to learn how he ticks, and I would say I have a decent idea of how he thinks. I almost got caught in the process, but that's a non-issue. Man, sensei really did rub off on me. In conclusion, Kurota-kun is dangerous. I need to work out how best to counter him with my little information or I'll get left behind. His main strengths are his slippery moves, allowing him to get away fast, his durability, and his unnatural stamina. These are his main weapons, but only focusing on them will put you right in his trap. Despite how monstrous his physical abilities are, he is not infallible. If you focus on trying to match his pace, you've already lost. Try to turn the battle in your favor as fast as possible. I'm still attempting to squeeze details out of him, but he is surprisingly hard to get a read on. I'll update when I get more information. Next pay. Archer, EMIYA. Archer. Servant. I am in hell. That is the only explanation I have for how Sensei is acting in terms of my training. I will admit, I got a bit overzealous with how much progress I had been making and wanted to test myself against someone a bit stronger than Amiya-san, but I wasn't asking for an opponent that would make even the likes of Endeavor sweat. Prior to this spar, I only had an introductory lesson on what servants' heroic spirits were. In terms of anything concrete, this was my first bit of practical experience with them. Even if I train for years, I don't think I'll ever have a chance at standing up to one, especially considering this is one of them weakened. Strength, S+. There is nothing else I can give except for this. I might have to consider adding more rankings to this system if this keeps up. Archer far outclasses every hero and villain I've seen up to this point barring All Might, and that's being conservative. His overwhelming firepower is more than sufficient to put him at the top 10 of the worldwide hero rankings. Just because he is called an archer, does not mean that he is a slouch in hand-to-hand combat. Agility, SS. The hard light projectors in the training room don't do the people they make justice. Despite the fact that the computer that controls the software can accurately depict the behaviors and abilities of the opponents down to the smallest detail, it didn't capture the speed of Archer at its fullest. I couldn't even see the servant with how fast he moved. Stamina, infinity. I have nothing else to say. Element, sword. This is weird for me, because despite having the same obscure element as Amiya-san, he looked nothing like the teen from what I could see. I have some theories as to why this might be, but nothing concrete as of yet. Magecraft, specialized projection, but I don't know the others. Servant skills, this is a unique category that I will save for similar servants if I ever see any more. Independent action, magic resistance, clairvoyance, mind's eye and his noble phantasm, unlimited blade works. Strategizing, this is subject to change, seeing as I only got 1 or 2 spars in before training for the day stopped. From what I could see, Archer was an exceptional strategist, using his far superior abilities in moderation to get a gauge on how well I reacted to him. Once I have more time with him, I'll see how this changes. Servants are stupidly overpowered, and I should never fight them. That is the conclusion I came up with over the course of this analysis, but I will probably regret saying that to Lord El Meloy too though. I really need to get stronger if this is what I signed up to fight. Next pay. Bakugo Katsuki. I don't know how he did it, but Kaken managed to become even worse after we got to UA. He was pretty accepting of me suddenly having a quirk, which I did not have on my bingo card, but the fact he knows so much about me despite borderline torturing me makes the small jabs he takes after we made up hurt more. Bakugo Katsuki. Hero student. Kaken, where to start? I've known him since childhood, and we've basically done everything together, so he feels like a brother. Though, I can't speak much to that experience since I'm an only child. As much as I despise him, I can't help but admire Kaken's strength and tenacity. It's kind of embarrassing to even write this out, but he's always been my role model for what a hero should be. He's brave, resilient, and an amazing fighter who never takes anything sitting down. That's also where all his faults lie. As much as I appreciate Kaken for at least being there in my life like mom, it doesn't excuse his actions towards me for the last 10.5 years. I can't really hold it against him either, because if I had the spine to stand up to him back then maybe things could have been different. There's always 2 sides to every story, so maybe I can ask for his perspective sometime. Regardless, this is where I'd scale him to. Strength, Kaken is strong, insanely so for a student. His raw strength combined with his quirk, explosion make a dangerous combo for most foes. Against certified pro heroes, he falls a bit short, but that's mainly due to a lack of intense training compared to them. Agility endurance, compared to someone like Kurota, who relies on his reflexes and speed to slip out of attacks, and Kirishima, whose ability to tank a hit is on par with that of seasoned heroes like Fat Gum, Kaken is more of a balanced mix between the two. Not only is he able to keep fighting after significantly powerful attacks, but his grounded and aerial mobility allows him to avoid major damage and slip between an opponent's guard with relative ease. Stamina, A+. The only thing really inhibiting this from reaching towards S is that we still haven't figured out what is causing the weird reaction from his quirk. Until that is resolved, this will be a placeholder for what he should be capable of at this moment. Element, Fire. I know he was at the clock tower for the 6 months I was still in Japan after my initial disappearance, but the only thing I know for sure is that he has the element of fire. Magecraft? I don't know what they might be, but I know for a fact he has it. Quirk, Explosion. Kaken is able to secrete a nitroglycerin-like liquid from his glands in place of regular sweat. Whenever he feels like it, he can release a spark from his palms, and potentially elsewhere on his body, which then works to ignite his sweat, resulting in the quirk's namesake. That was the summarized description the doctor he went to gave him, but I don't buy it. Not only does his entire body heat up, and the area he focuses on burn orange like a furnace, but after Mr. Hatsum analyzed the chemical makeup of his sweat, along with sending it to a trusted team of professionals, and it came back with the data reporting no difference from the sweat of a normal human. I'll need to research further for now. Strategizing, S+. Kaken's battle instincts and ability to plan on the fly are amazing. Not only that, but with just a few seconds of viewing he was able to accurately predict how a self-proclaimed martial arts master was going to move within an instant. I think his ability to analyze situations might be better than most of those hired by pros, including the top 10. Overall, unless prepared for a messy and scrappy fight, anyone looking to engage with him should look to prepare measures against the weakness of his quirk, but even that might not help with his analytical mind. The best way to fight him at an even playing field would be to rile him up with insults to strike at his ego, though even that is dangerous because of his short temper. As I'm writing this, I just realized I never explained my ranking system. It's not like it really matters since I doubt anyone but me will read this, but I should probably do that just in case. Next pay, the Bakugan. Now that we know a bit more about the Bakugan, I thought it would be a good idea to make an entry for them. Since this will cover a broad range of possible subjects, I won't use the same ranking system from my previous entries. Maybe when I get a better range of abilities for Percival and Dragonoid I'll make separate pages for them. Bakugan. Entity. Bakugan, foreign subjects that came to our dimension through a haywire experiment with the rare metal found in small deposits on Earth called orichalcum. The person at the head of the phenomenon coined Vestalization, named after the home world of the Bakugan, is Hatsum Mei, daughter of genius engineer and lead researcher for Quirk Engineering Hatsum Iwano. Mei, who was experimenting with the imported orichalcum in order to make a new type of support gear, came up with the design of Bakugan and the name after many failed tests. I was the first one outside of herself to actually use the new model as we were walking home together after finishing UA's entrance exams. It was then that we discovered the true purpose behind the devices. In a brilliant flash of teal light, the prototype in my hands transformed, shaping itself into a new form of life, Aquos Percival. Through some minor experimentation and conversation with the Bakugan we learned of their home dimension, and of the Earth some of their kind came to inhabit. Their power was trapped behind a set of mysterious cards known as ability cards, which allowed them to wield their might in bursts to fight each other in a game. I don't know much about the game, due to other matters I needed to attend, but I do know that for whatever reason, the Bakugan are no longer limited to the cards. My partner, Percival, showed just how powerful he is, slicing through solid steel at what he claimed was just 6% of his true power. Moving on from their origin, I recently came about an interesting piece of information. They are directly connected to the person who awakened them through their quirk. Kaken came across, and inadvertently awakened, another Bakugan known as Dragonoid. For some odd reason, all of the Bakugan that we can confirm have been awakened all look like a draconic creature. The last major bit of information, other than them being sentient, is that after awakening our partners, Kaken and I's quirks have changed in ways that shouldn't be possible. We still don't know the full extent of what changed, but we do know that some sort of weird energy is now flowing through our veins. I'll update this entry when I get more information, but for now this is all that I know. Next pay, Hawks. Takami-sensei is interesting, to say the least. It's cool that we have 2 of the top 10 heroes as homeroom teachers, but something about him in particular just seems off. I don't want to assume anything, but especially after what happened on Friday, nothing has been the same. Hopefully it's nothing, but I'm gonna keep an eye on him for right now. Takami Kigo. Pro Hero. Takami-sensei, the youngest person in the world to reach top 10 hero status. Although he's mainly focused on Japan, it isn't odd to see him helping out another country such as the United States on a random day. His status as the fastest man alive, and being ranked in the top 100 heroes in the world isn't just for show. I was able to calculate based on one of his more recent fights, he's capable of reaching speeds not even machines could hope to match. This may be a little out there, but depending on how his quirk functions, it might be possible for him to do the unthinkable and surpass light speed. Theorizing aside, this is where I would rank Hawks. Strength, S, although being physically strong isn't his best attribute, being a top 10 hero does require a certain standard. During the incident on Friday, he was able to tussle with hundreds of opponents at the same time. His opening move was him swinging a huge cleaver of his feathers down on them. Agility, SS+. Without any better examples of speed sans all might, it's pretty difficult to find an accurate baseline for people. Other than that, his reflexes during combat and finesse would make him a monster to fight against. Endurance, B, not much to say here, he's capable of taking a hit, but a strong enough one would put him down, though being able to land one is a different story altogether. Stamina, S+. I usually don't rank a person's endurance and stamina on their first entry, but it felt right to do so with Sensei. Getting to Y, being able to fly for as long as he can, and still being able to fight afterward with little to no rest is insane. The fact alone that he can fly from Japan to America is amazing. Element, I don't know. Magecraft, the only one I've seen him use is reinforcement on his feathers. Quirk, fierce wings. As the name implies, it just gives him wings. But don't let the simplicity of it fool you, he can do a lot with them. From being able to sharpen and shape them at will, to combining them together to form an even more powerful weapon, Hawks has shown the capability and strategic mind to use his wings in ways even I thought impossible. There isn't a description anywhere online that gives even a hint to the full capacity of his quirk, but I've made do with just my own observations for now. Fierce wings is by far one of the more interesting quirks I've come across, and I can't wait to learn more. Strategizing, S. I haven't been able to fight alongside, or even fight Takami-sensei one-on-one yet, so I'm putting this ranking with a bit of suspicion. With the fact alone that he can calculate the right weapons to use on the fly, and his combat prowess, I have to give him an S until I can figure out more. In conclusion, Takami-sensei is an anomaly in my books. Becoming a top 3 hero in the blink of an eye, when no one knew who he was, already set off some alarms in my head, but I just took that as people being captured by his looks. Now that I've met him in person, and I know that he's been tailing me ever since I came back to Japan, I don't know what to think. I'll just go along with it for now, because he was sent to do so by the HPSC, which means it's not likely he was doing it for any nefarious reasons. Otherwise, Hawks is an extremely dangerous opponent. Fighting him is probably the worst option you can take, though running away is a close second. Take all of his words with a grain of salt, the feeling I get from him should be the first warning of that. Next pay, Tosaka Rin. Tosaka-san, the third person I've faced through use of the Clock Tower's hardlight simulation room. When El-Meloy-2 sensei first had me face her, there was something about his expression that threw me off big time. Now I understand that was his way of hinting that I was gonna get my butt kicked. I don't usually curse, but it took about 30 tries to even barely win the fight. Maybe there was some kind of mental barrier in my head that wouldn't allow me to try seriously against a girl that looked about half my weight, even with how, admittedly, scrawny I am, but whatever it was, that's completely gone. As a side note, I can't help but feel like there was something off about Tosaka-san. Every fight, it felt like she knew every move I would make, but maybe I just need to stop being so predictable. Tosaka Rin. Magus. Lord El-Meloy-2 wasn't kidding when he said Tosaka-san would give me a surprise, because despite her weaker stature, she was by far my toughest opponent yet. Some days, I'll sneak in a bit of extra training when everyone in the dorms are asleep, and set up the simulator so I can fight her. I've learned a bunch of new tactics and battle strategies through sparring with her. It makes me a bit sad to know that when I have to leave the clock tower I won't have access to any of the technology here. Getting back on track, this is how I'd rank Tosaka-san. Strength, DC. Without her incredible use of the reinforcement spell, there isn't much to write home about her physical strength. It's clear with a single glance that, similar to Lord El-Meloy-2, Tosaka isn't one to focus on strength over progressing in the field magecraft. Agility, C again, not much to say here. When she wants to move, she will, but not at speeds where someone like Kaken would struggle. Stamina endurance, B able to take a few hits and get back up relatively quickly, but struggles in long drawn-out fights. Element, she is the only person I know of that has access to all 5 great elements, making her a real threat when allowed to use her magecraft. Magecraft, speaking of which, she wields a unique form of it that I've never encountered through my studies called Jewel Magecraft, that allows her to use jewels to store spells. Along with reinforcement, her mastery over every facet of her knowledge as a Magus work in tandem to create a force that make a tough foe. Quirk, I don't know, Sensei mentioned something about it offhand, but never said anything else. Strategizing, even factoring in all of the magi in the clock tower who've challenged me to a fight, why is that a thing they can just do? Tosaka stands above the rest in terms of pure strategic might. Her ability to plan for every move I made was tricky to deal with. Combine that with the wherewithal to actively set up traps mid-combat is dangerous to go up against. Just 1 or 2 bouts with her made me completely rethink any plan I made, and now I feel enlightened with new ways to battle when I become a hero. In conclusion, Tosaka-san is a very tricky opponent to face. If not for the fact it was a simulation, I might have been seriously injured with her spells. Her use of jewels packed with a spell make it nearly impossible to know what she might do until it's already too late. I think I'll continue to test these new strategies of mine against previous opponents like Archer and Amiya-san. I really wish I could meet the real people servants, instead of just light projections, but Sensei says I still have a long way to go until then. So, I'll keep on improving, then one day I can finally meet these magi. Next pay, Miruko. Usagiyama-sensei, where do I even begin? For all of her hot-headedness, she knows when to calm it down and how to plan for an occasion. Despite that, usually her first, and only, option is to rush in and start swinging. Frankly, she's brash, incredibly so, but that doesn't stop her from being an amazing teacher. I've already learned more in the way of fighting than I have anywhere else, including the clock tower. Usagiyama Rumi. Pro Hero. Usagiyama-sensei is a different beast when it comes to fighting. I don't think I've seen anyone come close to landing a hit on her during our training other than Takami-sensei. She did mention having a super enhanced body thanks to her quirk, but something about that explanation feels a bit lacking. This is where I would rank Miruko. Strength, S+. Miruko is extremely physically capable, especially with her legs being her main method of attack. She's able to effortlessly kick through reinforced steel like it's paper, and with one of the measurements I did the other day, I found that just a single Luna fall she produces about 2 gigajoules of energy at the moment of impact. Agility, S+. She is fast, really fast. I doubt anyone who is not on the level of someone like Yoroi Musha would even be capable of catching up to her. The sheer versatility of her powerful bounds makes it almost impossible to predict where she might attack from. Stamina Endurance, SS, out of all of the heroes I have entries for currently, Usagiyama-sensei is undoubtedly one of the best when it comes to fighting for long PRDS of time and taking a hit. During class, she held a demonstration with All Might where he punched her through 5 buildings in the training grounds, and she walked it off like it was nothing. Element, I don't think she's even a Magus. Magecraft, again, not sure she even has circuits, but if she did there would probably be some form of reinforcement. Quirk, Rabbit. As the name suggests, Rabbit allows the wielder to do anything a rabbit can, and with the enhanced body to boot. With her highly strengthened legs, Miruko has pulled off incredible feats of strength that reach the levels of Star and Stripe. Her permanently transformed ears grant her the ability to hear more frequencies than a normal human, and at farther ranges. One thing that always escaped me was the specific classification of rabbit that her quirk was based off of. Given the size and shape of her ears, she more closely resembles an American fuzzy lop, however the level of strength could be more attributed to the Australian kangaroo. Perhaps she's a mix between different breeds, similar to Azui. Strategizing, B-. Her head-first approach to situations could lead you to believe she isn't that bright when it comes to making plans, but that's actually false. Usagiyama-sensei did graduate from UA at the top of her class, and she was able to get her teaching license in under a year due to how easily she aced the tests, but she still prefers the head-empty throw hands-first approach. In conclusion, Miruko is an extremely dangerous opponent. Her previous track record of seeming like a delinquent is mostly an act there to keep your guard down and give her the opportunity to plan ahead and completely disassemble your fighting style. Whatever you do, do not underestimate her in a fight. The massive strength in her legs gives her many versatile options when it comes to using the terrain, so your best bet would be to bring the fight somewhere empty and devoid of obstacles. But even then, the moment you engage in battle with her, it's already too late. Her strength is too much for most people, heroes included, to match, so the most effective strategy would be to derive her of her main method of attack, if you can catch her that is. Next pay. Saber, Arthur Pendragon. Arthur Pendragon, also known as the legendary King Arthur of Avalon, the King of Knights. While some might see the many titles, and assume him to be more mythical than man, any who have seen him fight would know that to be exactly the case. He wields the legendary blade Excalibur, and his very presence commands respect of all those around. While I can only speak of my own experience, King Arthur is really just a normal guy. The fact that he's from times only known to the modern world from stories and myths doesn't change anything. His interests lie in pretty outdated practices, but we still follow most of the same things, just updated to modern standards. Arthur Pendragon. Servant. I'm still in a bit of shock at how I met King Arthur. The time I spent at Chaldea is still messing with my head a bit, but the experience was still worth it in my eyes. Sensei said that I should remember my time there vividly, something about a new one, whatever that meant. Before I left though, Ling Arthur gave me this weird sheath. I don't know what it is, but he told me to hide it from everyone and keep it safe until the time was right. Color me surprised when the thing shrunk down and moved into my ear. Either way, this is how I'd rank Arthur Pendragon. Strength, SSS. He could easily match levels of strength only shown by other servants, and all might, so that's the only thing I could feasibly give him. I might have to update these ranking parameters soon. Agility, SS. It was literally impossible for me to track his movements whatsoever for the first few days, and even now I'd be struggling to keep up. Stamina, Infinity. He's a servant. Element, Earth. I honestly wasn't expecting something so mundane, what with the other weird elements out there, but it does fit pretty well. Servant skills, magic resistance, riding, charisma, instinct, mana burst, and his noble phantasm, Excalibur. Strategizing, the man is a genius when it comes to combat. His short bouts with other servants at Chaldea proved how capable he was at picking apart opponents on the same level of strength, if not higher. In conclusion, servants are insanely powerful, and avoid all combat with one at all time no matter what. That is the only thing I can tell anyone to do, but even then the moment you even think about doing so the fight is already over. Next pay. Tokoyami Fumikage. Tokoyami, he's an interesting one for sure. I haven't talked to him much, but I get this feeling from him, like there's something more to him that I haven't seen. His quirk, Dark Shadow, is sentient, and shows similar traits to Cerberus, just more talkative. I've gotten the chance to study her a bit, and nothing seems out of the ordinary, but I can't shake that feeling. Tokoyami Fumikage. Hero Student. Seeing as there isn't much I can say about him as of yet, other than what I've seen and heard about from the USJ incident, I'll just get right into his rankings. Strength, C, S. If we're just going over his physical strength without aid from Dark Shadow, he's just above the average, but including her, he gets pushed up quite a few notches. Agility, B, since he does still have to run everywhere, it's no surprise that he's quick on his feet. Not enough for him to be on par with the likes of Kaken or Karuta, but enough so that he can keep up in high-intensity situations. Endurance Stamina, B+, S. He's able to take a hit, but without Dark Shadow he can't sustain much for too long or else it's lights out. Element, I can't tell if he's a Magus or not, but if he had an element it'd probably be Dark or something similar. Magecraft, none, as far as I know. Quirk, Dark Shadow. This is where we get to the real portion of Tokoyami's abilities, his quirk. Dark Shadow is a sentient being born from Tokoyami's quirk, however contradicting most cases other than rare ones this one was able to develop a personality of its own. With her ability to act on her own accord, Dark Shadow is able to attack and defend her partner independently. One of the few drawbacks to this, however, is what the two call a berserker state. If the area around them is dark enough, Dark Shadow will power up immensely, but continuous exposure will cause her to go out of control, fighting with Tokoyami for full autonomous control of his body. This is easily counteracted by her other weakness, light. A harsh enough exposure to a luminescent source will cause Dark Shadow's power to dwindle, until eventually requiring her to seek refuge inside of Tokoyami's body. This is a powerful quirk, but the drawbacks respond in kind. My theory is that with the more training the two have dealing with those conditions, the better their individual resistance to each will be, but I haven't had the time to tell Tokoyami about it. Strategizing, I doubt I'll get a good insight on how Tokoyami's mind works for a bit, but going off of my experience having Sage, I doubt that his mental capacity would be lacking. In conclusion, Tokoyami by himself is a pretty unassuming opponent, but that's where he traps you. The moment your guard is down, Dark Shadow will come out, using the power she stored within Tokoyami's body to win the fight easily. The best way to fight would be in a well-lighted area, or using equipment to provide flashes here and there to weaken Dark Shadow. That might not work however, because the shadows are their domain. Next pay. Waver Velvet. Another opponent Sensei had me fight in the hard light projector. The fight itself wasn't particularly difficult, but the way Velvet used earth magic was really tricky to deal with. I don't know much about him, since Sensei didn't give me all too much of an introduction, but after I won he seemed really mad for some reason. Did I do something wrong? Waver Velvet. Magus. I don't know much about him, so I guess I'll just start ranking him. Strength, D. His punches were pretty pathetic, and didn't really hurt at all, so this is really the only thing I can give him. Agility, D. Again, not much to say, he was pretty weak all around. Endurance Stamina, honestly I would probably give him lower than D if possible here. Element, Earth. The way he used it was pretty similar to Sensei. I wonder if he was a student of his? Magecraft, it was over too fast for me to see anything. Quirk, none as far as I'm aware. Strategizing, B, I'll give him some credit here, his use of Earth was kind of tricky to deal with, and he did show that he was trying to set up future plans, but his physical strength held him back greatly. In conclusion, I don't really have much to say here. The only thing I picked up from here was that Waver Velvet was weak. Honestly, he reminds me of myself a few months ago, quirkless with nothing to show for my dream of being a hero. Is this what Sensei wanted to show me? Just how far I've come in such a short amount of time under his watch. I wouldn't put it past him. The only highlight after this was that he let me walk around the streets of London after training, something I only get to do once every few weeks or so. I saw some pretty cool heroes, and I should probably end this entry, shouldn't I? Next pay, digging deeper. I've noticed that ever since starting at UA, my analysis has been getting a bit sloppy. Not only that, but all of the new things I've learned since leaving the clock tower has made it clear that my previous work just won't cut it in the long run. Maybe I'm overreacting, but I feel that I can do much better than what I am now. So, starting from today onwards, I'll be putting in my A game to make sure this is the best analysis notebook I've ever written. I need to finish rewriting some of my hero entries, so I'll start there. I doubt anyone other than myself and maybe Kaken would see this, but just in case I'll put up a better guideline for what to expect. To follow the new rules I'm setting up, the previous data will still be considered, but will be updated to match current standards. Starting off, instead of arbitrary letters with vague information given, all categories will feature full in-depth calculations for how far into a specific data set any listed person's is. For example, the prior measurement for the strength category was from the average of normal humans to being capable of bending destroying titanium. This is inherently flawed. The letter rating will still appear, however the far-reaching values such as SSS will be saved for cases where that is the only sufficient rating capable of accurately showcasing someone's data. With that out of the way, this is the new and updated ranking system. Note, this is for all categories. Full specifics will be provided at each checkpoint category. F-, this is the lowest possible ranking someone can receive in any given metric. Getting this does not mean that this person is weak in that category, this is just meant to show the average for a normal person that you could find out on the street. F, above average. F+, far above average. E-, very far above average. E, the average of most Magi hero. E+, above the average Magi hero. D-, far above the average Magi hero. D, very far above the average Magi hero. D+, what most would attribute to superhuman. C-, above superhuman. C, far above superhuman. C+, very far above superhuman. B-, peak superhuman. B, inhuman. B+, exceptionally inhuman. A-, peak inhuman. A, otherworldly. A+, peak otherworldly. S-, demigod. S, lower god. S+, godly. SS, outer god. SSS, incomprehensible. With that out of the way, here are the scoring metrics for each category using these tiers as guides. Strength. This is a contested category, as with the emergence of quirks and counting the addition of Magecraft it would normally be virtually impossible to score anyone on such an arbitrary scale. Thankfully I don't have to go through all of the trouble. The IHA, or International Heroes Association, and the Clock Tower have already used their influence on all of the countries in the world to test the might of every registered Magi and hero. Starting from F, slightly above the base strength of the average human. Anyone placed here in terms of strength would be able to act within this established boundary, which includes being able to lift the weight of another human, or the capability to break bones with strain. Moving up a letter grade is E, or what one could say is an average hero Magus of the modern day. Notable measures of strength include being able to lift up to 272 kilograms with slight strain and the ability to break 3 centimeters thick wood with a single strike. Next is D+. People would say this is the level of strength needed to exceed the mass of heroes, or being a superhuman. This would include being able to lift a car with ease and being able to fully punch through, and break, a wall in an average house. A good reference for this would be Death Arms, who is able to easily topple buildings within minutes. Proceeding after that is B, someone who is capable of inhuman feats of strength. Someone ranked here would be classified as being within the top 50 of heroes in Japan on strength alone, so this is a person who is not to be messed with. Notable feats include the ability to fully lift the weight of a 3-story building made of concrete with no strain and the strength to break apart titanium alloys with their bare hands. References include the likes of Ryukyu or Yoroi Musha. Next is A, or someone with otherworldly strength. Someone at this tier could only be placed at the top 10 of their respective countries' rankings. They would have the strength to lift large metallic structures, such as the United States Solaris Voyager, the largest and most advanced flying military vehicle, and the ability to destroy entire mountains with their fists. Prominent figures include the likes of Endeavor from Japan, Salamander from Spain, and Thomas Andre from the US. S to S+ can all be grouped together due to the innocuous nature of people's strength within this tier. This would be reserved for those who can exhibit levels of strength that all but guarantees their spot within the IHA's top 10 in the entire world. Most here haven't shown off all of their strength, whether that be due to their other abilities or other anonymous reasons. Those typically within this strength bracket have shown the ability to handle the weight of artificial stars and move entire sections of Earth. One notable example would be Star and Stripe destroying a meteor that threatened to hit the Earth 10 years ago. Figures that would be placed here include Star and Stripe, X, All Might, and others in the IHA's top 10. The last two categories, SS and SSS, have no known peoples that can be ranked, so I will avoid listing them for now. Speed. This category is far more straightforward, as speed is a less subjective measurement. One thing to keep in mind, however, there are those that stand out immensely. Due to the continued understanding of mathematics and the laws of our world, the calculations of a person's speed is far easier to gauge than it would have been during the 21st century or so. Since this is a lot more math-heavy, I'll do my best to lessen the learning curve for it. Starting out we have F, or what would be an above-average adult human. This is the easiest to get values for, that being anywhere from 27.72 km/h to 37.08 km/h. Due to the pretty low baseline, I'll avoid listing anyone who fits as most would far exceed this. Next up is E. The next step up in terms of speed is the place where most heroes of today would fit in. Since the profession requires a certain level of fitness in order to succeed, it wouldn't be wrong to say this is the true baseline for all people I'll bring up in future entries. The average recorded speed for people in this category is between 123.48 km/h and 617.4 km/h. After that is what people say is the start of truly extraordinary levels of speed, D+. Notable figures include the likes of Crust and Kamui Woods. The range of speed is anywhere between 1,110.6 km/h and 1,358.28 km/h. B is where things start to get insane. People at Thin's range can casually break the speed of sound hundreds of times over at their top speeds, something that would be unthinkable even for technology just 500 years ago. The average speed is between 123,480 km/h and 1.235 e plus 6 km/h or 0.1% the speed of light. Prominent figures in this category would include Ghostblade from China and Ryukyu in her full Dragoon form. Before I move on to the next category, I want to preface something for anyone other than myself that might be reading this. Humanity found a way to exceed the speed of light approximately 170 years ago. I will not explain further, my head already hurts just thinking about the DMN 100 pages I had to go through just for these calculations. With that out of the way, here is A to S+. The range for this is 1.079 e plus 9 km/h to 1.079 e plus 12 plus km/h or the speed of light and faster. It's basically impossible to calculate the exact speeds, but a lot of people fit here surprisingly. Prominent people are All Might, Hawks, X, Endeavor, Salamander, and others in that range of rankings. Endurance. How long a person can last while taking hits or expending their energy. A pretty straightforward measurement, outside of a few heroes like Ryukyu who hasn't had the opportunity to show just how much they can handle. I'll avoid listing the categories that are really self-explanatory. Such as endurance, there really isn't much I can add on here without wanting to go jump in a crocodile-infested lake. Intelligence. This is more of a subjective category that I'm doing for fun since it's really difficult to accurately measure how smart a person is. Due to this, I will not be using the ranking system and will instead focus on more practical examples of the subject. I will be including things such as ability to form a plan on the fly, how easily someone can navigate a combat scenario with no prior knowledge, and if I get the opportunity one will test them with commanding tabletop war strategies. Quirks. The mysterious abilities that gave birth to the profession of hero. In this category I will detail the subject's quirk in detail, and also include any theories on usage that I find interesting to look into. I will be using the ranking system for the quirks themselves, but they shouldn't be the only thing you go off of. Rankings are subjective, actual experience is what really matters here. Personal information. Here I will go over who the person is outside of their abilities. Knowing how an opponent will attack you is useful, yes, but knowing who they are will ultimately decide the winner. I include this because I don't want anyone to think of the people I write here as just subject entries on paper. They were real living human beings. Just using someone as a data point or statistic is not just disrespectful, but also ignoring what gives us all the humanity to keep living. Anyone reading this might disagree with the person, but that gives you no right to take away the human that is behind those opinions. Magecraft. Due to the pretty secret nature of Magus society, I'll try my best to keep this towards the bottom of every entry. It wouldn't be a good look if I managed to leak something so important just because I wanted to analyze it, coded or not. This will cover things like element and any spells I find out the person can use, however my knowledge on that might be limited. And that should be all. I expected to get many more headaches writing this, whether they come from the sheer amount of information or Percival notwithstanding. Either way, I'll include little excerpts at the end of each entry with a small doodle of the person and other things that don't fit into any of my established categories. With that done, now we can get started on this new revamped analysis. Next pay. This will be the first analysis I do with these new guidelines, and it's one that needs to be done if you're striving to become a hero. All Might. The #1 hero in Japan, and also in the entire world. All Might is the pinnacle of modern-day society, and without him we would never have the peace we do today. Though, that doesn't mean that everything is fine. With his waning power, villains are only getting bolder, the USJ incident being a prime example of that fact. All Might, the #1 hero, and the symbol of peace and justice. He's the pillar that keeps our society afloat, and his many years of hero work has made him the perfect example of what it means to be a hero. Sadly, time will wait for none, even All Might. After a major battle 5 years ago, he suffered an injury that permanently limited the amount of time he can be a hero. Now, after all of this time, he can only protect the peace of the world for 3 hours a day, something that led him to his current path. Teaching the next generation. That's not the only reason he's here, however, he's also here to find a worthy successor of his quirk, One for All One. With the exposition out of the way, let's hop into this analysis. Starting off, we have his strength, and this is no contest. Even with his diminishing power, All Might is more than capable of holding his own against the best of the best. Just 2 years ago, during a massive villain attack that affects much of eastern China to this day, All Might was able to defeat a massive turtle villain that threatened to trample upon nearby cities. With just one punch, All Might was able to break through the villain's tough shell and knock him out clean. If that isn't enough to place him in at least the S category, then I don't know what will. Based on the information I could gather, it would be more apt to place him higher even now, due to the crazy amount of foes he's felled within just the last year alone, on top of his unrivaled reign at the top of the IHA's ranking charts. Given this, I find it more than fair to place him at S tier for his strength. Up next is speed, and this is a bit harder to gauge. Going off of just the things he's shown, the only place that would make sense would be B tier. However, with context clues, and a bit of calculations, I've narrowed down his true speed to a few pretty accurate placements. As I mentioned before, the baseline for his speed based off of showings in the last 3 years would be B. This includes things like being able to keep up with, and even outspeed, some of the most advanced fighter jets in the world, such as when he had a friendly race across the US with a pilot that asked. Things that further reinforce that point would be him casually breaking the sound barrier whenever he runs from place to place. Countless times, there have been reports of air displacement on his usual patrol routes. Moving on from that, we have things that support placing him much higher than just going based off of data publicly provided by the IHA. Hawks, the #3 of Japan, has recorded speeds of 1.079 times 10 to the power of 11, PR far exceeding lightspeed. If this is true, which is supported by him being able to cross the width of the Atlantic Ocean in seconds, then because of the fact that Hawks himself has admitted that All Might is faster than him, it would make perfect sense to place him in at least S, if not S+. This is where things go downhill, endurance. If this were him before his injury, it would be a no-brainer to put him in S+, or even SS due to the fact that there was never an instance of him even slightly tiring out after some of his toughest fights, but that's changed now, a lot. The exact position is a little hard to find, but for All Might as he is right now, I would place him at D+. All Might has a unique take on his own intelligence. Quoting him, I wouldn't say I'm smart at all. Even though I did pass, my grades while I was at UA were deep in the gutter compared to everyone else. As my master would tell me, I'm pretty much a muscle head. And it was a string of laughter from there. Either way, the fact he got into UA at all is already impressive. Compared to the average high school, it's shown that UA students are far above the average. He's able to form plans to beat opponents within seconds of their first exchange, and he's even been tested by Principal Nedzu himself. From what I've heard, it seems he did pretty well also. I haven't had the opportunity to fully assess what he can do, but I'll update this once I do. This is where even I got stumped, All Might's quirk. For years, people have debated and theorized about what his quirk was, and out of all of the normal civilians out there, I'm pretty sure I'm the only one who knows. One for all, a quirk that had been passed down through countless generations of people, and finally ended up in the hands of our symbol of peace back. All Might himself was born quirkless, like me, or kind of like me. His predecessor passed it down to him before her death, and ever since he's been cultivating it into a power worthy of number one. I don't have much information other than that, but honestly I might need to make a separate analysis of the quirk itself for how mysterious it is. If not for any reason other than my own curiosity, then because I'm All Might's choice in successor. I'm excited about that, but I don't know if it would even make sense, given I hardly even know how to use my own quirk. All Might, or Yagi Tashinori, his civilian name, is a righteous man with the will and drive to protect everyone he can. Based on my, admittedly few, conversations with him outside of being slightly out of touch when it comes to modern-day stuff due to being invested in hero work, Yagi-sensei is a pretty down-to-earth person. Most would assume that his time as the number one hero in the world would make him a more self-righteous person, but it's actually the opposite. He does have issues with some things, like what to say to a kid who just poured his heart out to him on the roof of a building notwithstanding, but overall, he is a very nice person to speak with, and his experience going all around the world and saving people just proves his overwhelming selflessness. He has admitted to using magecraft before, but I couldn't get any information out of him about what in particular he does. Supposedly it's a huge secret that I'll learn once he passes on One for All to me, but it's kind of weird why he can't just tell me now. And that's done. If I were to make a summary of this, I would tell you to stick your head in the ocean. The calculations for this took way too long, and Percival keeps bugging me to get back to training for the sports festival, so goodbye. Next pay. What happens when an unwavering will to be the manliest there is gets paired with a power that makes the user an immovable wall that protects others? You get Kirishima. I may not have known him for a long time, but ever since I've gotten back from the clock tower I can wholeheartedly say that Kirishima is one of the coolest people I've ever met. Not only does he always strive to improve, whether that be by training his body and quirk, or trying his best to memorize the layout of UA, but he also is a great person to be around. I swear, at this rate I might start saying manly after every sentence. For someone without a strength enhancement quirk, Kirishima is amazingly strong. One time, Takami-sensei took us to a training facility on UA's campus. Man, is this school massive, in order to test our physical strength, and Kirishima had to use the weights specifically designed for people with strength enhancement quirks, some of which can get up to the kilotons in weight. From what I wrote down, only 6 people needed those weights: Sato, Shuji, Kirishima, Tetsu, Kaken, and myself. That alone should put him, and Tetsu by proxy since they tied, in B in terms of strength. Speed is a pretty cut and dry topic, especially since Kirishima is pretty slow with and without his quirk. He's definitely faster than most, but the way he fights seems like more of a limiter for his full potential, like he has something he needs to prove. I was tempted to ask, but decided against it in the end. If he does have something he feels he needs to prove, then I'd be a hypocrite to stop him. I'm sure he has his reasons, and if he's ever in need of help, then I'll come running. With all of that in mind, I'd probably place his speed at E+ or D, to be safe. This is by far his best measurement, Kirishima's endurance. The first I was able to witness of this was in the battle Kaken and I had against the class. Because I was having a fight of my own, I wasn't able to witness it for myself, but Kamae-sensei did make us go over it in class, so I have a pretty good idea of what went down. He was able to stand up well against Kaken's explosions, even pushing him to create an entirely new move to win. While up against Kaken's new move, despite having help from Rin and Tsuburaba, it was clear he took the brunt of the attack. He may have fallen unconscious because of it, but apart from a few burns on his hair and body, along with his costume disintegrating in the heat, he was fine. The same holds true when him, Kaken, Todoroki, and I fought against Shigaraki, the leader of the group that attacked the USJ. He got hit pretty hard, his hardening getting smashed through, but even then he was completely fine after the battle. The only reason he didn't come back into the fight was because he got stuck in a wall, and wasn't able to get out until Tetsu came to help him. I give him an A-. Battle strategy isn't really something Kirishima specializes in, but when he puts his mind to it he can at least come up with something that isn't just rush in head-on. Apart from that, his ability to adapt to his surroundings and opponents still makes him a force to be reckoned with. I would bring up the tabletop war game we played during lunch, but he did still take 3 of my units out? His quirk, hardening, allows him to do exactly what you think, harden any part of his body to that of a rock-like structure. From my testing, I've observed that instead increase his natural resistance by a static multiplier like most other durability-related quirks, hardening instead makes him exponentially more durable. It doesn't function like you think it would either. A few days ago, since everyone was preparing for the sports festival, I decided to help out Kaken and Kirishima with their quirks. Kaken would keep using powerful explosions to hopefully overcome the pain he felt whenever he used them, and every time Kirishima's hardening would shatter he would immediately reapply it. With this training method, Kaken was able to push through more of the pain, and I learned that Kirishima's hardening would always become stronger whenever it broke to match the threat he was up against, like some sort of adaptation. I'm hoping to learn even more about it in the days leading up to the sports festival, but just the data I have now shows that he'd be a force to be reckoned with in battle. If there's anything bigger than Kirishima's love of all things manly, it's his personality. He might seem a bit intimidating when you first meet him, but that sentiment will be erased immediately the moment you get to speaking with him. I overheard a few of the girls talking about him, and they described him as a golden retriever, something I think fits perfectly. The way he rushes in to protect and help others is a quality that everyone should strive towards in my opinion. I believe that's one of the things that makes a true hero. As I mentioned before, it seems like he has something he wants to prove. I wish I knew what it was so I could at least offer some advice, but I don't think we're close enough for that. Maybe I could ask Ashido? She mentioned something about knowing him since the beginning of junior high, but with the tension still present with the class over the Bakugan I doubt she'd be too welcoming. With Sage's continued work on fully disengaging the seal on my magic circuits, I haven't been able to sense any traces of magecraft in the school. Since I decided against using her for the sports festival due to the unfair advantage it would give, she returned her full focus on it, so I'm relying on my own analysis for this. I have no doubts that if he were, Kirishima would make an exceptional Magus. If he knew the reinforcement spell, he'd become a powerhouse. I do wish I could use more of my magecraft though, at this rate I'll get rusty. Kirishima is an adaptive powerhouse. Where he lacks in battle tactics, he more than excels in pure physical power. His inhuman endurance makes head-on confrontations a defeat waiting to happen unless you're strong enough to overcome his quirk. Even that isn't a guarantee though, as his body's ability to adapt to strong attacks in seconds means he won't be down for long. His hardening also grows to match each and every attack that manages to break through it, so drawn-out battles only put you at a major disadvantage in the long run. In order to win, you need to strike hard enough to break through his quirk in a single attack, and keep up the pressure with quick, persistent blows that throw him off just enough to disrupt Kirishima's focus, so his hardening won't come back stronger. Never let your guard down when engaging him. Just one attack is enough for him to instantly win back the advantage tenfold. Next pay. Most people dream of living in a legacy family, whether for the status, wealth, or connections it would give. But the more I look at Yaoyorozu, who is, in all regards other than name, basically a princess, I can't shake the feeling that a dream such as that is anything but a falsity. I'm not sure why, but ever since her and I were chosen to be the class vice president and president respectively, she's gotten increasingly more disheartened. Just like with Kirishima, I won't pry into it too much, but I can't help feeling like the more no one addresses that something is wrong, the consequences will only worsen when everything starts to crack. As far as I've seen, Yaoyorozu seems to be weaker in her physical strength. Not lacking purse, but not significant enough to stand out compared to someone like Shuji, and not average like Hagakure, just there. With that in mind, I think giving her an E+ here works best. Her speed is another place where she's just above average. I don't doubt that she's trained hard, and with her creations she showed she could create things like scooters to help her in that aspect, but that alone isn't enough to contend with others that are far above that. This is better than her strength, but marginally so, therefore I'll stick with the E+ here as well. Yaoyorozu is surprisingly durable, something I learned after a short spar I had with her the other day. Although neither of us used our quirks, I can adamantly say that I hit pretty hard. Obviously I held back, but even with those limitations she held up really well. I might spar with her again, though this time with training weapons. I want to brush up more on the stances Arthur Pendragon taught me while I was at Chaldea, and someone with as much technical skill as Yaoyorozu would be the perfect opponent. That aside, I'd give her endurance a flat D. Going back to the other day, after our spar I asked Yaoyorozu about her quirk, and somehow she was able to keep up with my rapid-fire questions. I didn't do it on purpose, mind you, but even then the only person other than Gray who was able to keep up with me was May, and that girl is an entirely different breed. We also went through a short war game scenario. I say short, because each of us went down to less than 3 squadrons in under 5 minutes. Almost every strategy she deployed was tactically sound, and it forced me on the back foot more than once. I was pretty close to losing towards the end, but right when she was about to take the last action to win she hesitated hard. It was worse than what happened when I played against Kaminari, and it let me completely trample over her defense in an instant. That left me a bit off. For her to be at an advantage and then lose it so easily is dangerous. After the match I thought back to other points during it where something similar occurred, and it pointed me towards a worrying pattern. When I confronted her about it after chatting about our quirks a bit more, she brushed it off as my strategy being unorthodox and throwing her off guard, but that's definitely not the case. I'll try to dig a little deeper into it before the sports festival, but something tells me I've already missed my chance. Yaoyorozu's quirk, creation, is something I could fill up an entire notebook just theorizing about it. Her explanation of it was pretty interesting as well, and makes me even more excited to find out more. According to her, she creates things using her lipids and fat glands, her body transfusing them into whatever she wants as long as she can properly visualize how it's made, and the materials it's made from. At first I accepted it. There are quirks that do crazier things all around us, but the more I thought about it the less sense it made. Leaving aside the visualization process, the mass conversion itself is the main mystery. Because of the fact matter cannot be created or destroyed, the only scientific explanation for how that would work is that her body somehow compounds and compresses all of the fat in her body where it'd sit ready until she was ready to create something with it. I found 3 things wrong with that conclusion. The first is that the amount of fat in her body would have to be approximately the density of a star in order to create the things she does, like cannons. Last I checked, she wasn't sinking into the earth like it was made of sludge, and she didn't have her own gravitational pull. Second was the issue of converting the mass. The density issue can be passed off as weird quirk hijinks, but this can't. Her body would have to constantly be 150,000 times the temperature of the core of the sun in order to fundamentally change the state of matter of pure mass that's the density of a star. Even being generous and assuming the conversion process only happened when she wanted to, and apart from that one moment her body was normal, that singular moment should implode our galaxy and cause an event horizon that encompassed around 30% of our observable universe. But if we somehow moved past that, excusing it as quirk hijinks times 2 as Mr. Hatsum put it, the last problem would be how the mass is leaving her body. Something I noticed when Yaoyorozu uses her quirk is that a flash of white, blue, and pink particles exit her skin whenever she creates something, and that's where the object usually exits her skin. In order for something, no matter how small, to phase out of your skin would require either it or you to be vibrating at a frequency high enough to spread your atoms just enough that it passes through the solid without disturbing anything. A good showcase of this phenomenon would be one of the inventions May made that let her pass the support course entrance exams. From what I can observe though, this isn't the case, not even close. And all of that brings me to my working theory for Yaoyorozu's quirk: her body is a pocket dimension. It might sound crazy when you first see that, but the more you think about it, the more sense it makes. If her body isn't storing the mass from her fat in her physical body due to the sheer density of it, then it would need to store it somewhere it could, a pocket dimension. That would also explain how the mass gets converted. The dimension is basically just a massive furnace hotter than the core of the sun by exponential amounts made only to aid in the process. Obviously some of the fat would stay in her body, but using her quirk and opening the dimensional furnace as I've dubbed it would naturally leak some heat, burning it up instantly. And then from there, once she visualizes the object she wants to create, a portal to the output feed of the furnace would open, and push out the new creation. As this is still a working theory, but the best one I have that doesn't make my head explode, there are a few issues with it, the most obvious two being the visualization process, and if the heat from the furnace actually does burn up the excess fat in Yaoyorozu's body. If that were the case then, her BRSTS would have shrunk to non-existence after how much she's used it, which means the furnace is unable to interfere with her body, or she has amazing genetics. The visualization process is where I'm actually stumped though, not because I can't understand it, but because the implications of it would mean she's holding back the true potential of her quirk by many magnitudes. What I've come up with is that Yaoyorozu's brain acts as a sort of supercomputer for the dimensional furnace, allowing it to create anything she wants, and I mean anything. The process seems more like advanced 3D printing, but more natural than that, or just pure alchemy. If she's able to make anything out of materials like stone or a superalloy, then that means as long as she knows the atomic compounds that make up an element, then she should be able to make anything out of those elements. Something like orichalcum, or resources native to someplace like the Dragon continent shouldn't be off limits, including chemicals, gases, or even fictional elements should be possible. But theorizing isn't enough. The only way to find out would be to test it with Yaoyorozu, or stick my head into the dimensional furnace to see for myself. As they say, anything for science. Moving past her confusing quirk is an introspective for Yaoyorozu. Even without many chances to see her in action, I can tell that she's a born leader, someone you know you can rely on if things get too tough. I think she knows this as well, but instead of developing an ego because of it, she tries to stay down to earth and humble, even with her wealthy background. Despite that though, there still seems to be traces of a personality similar to that lingering deep beneath all of the layers of her humility, just not directed towards others. Her words when it comes to her own performance say that she just needs to try harder, or that she can't keep up with someone like Bakugo, Todoroki, and Midoriya, but her eyes tell a different story. She's hard on herself to a fault, to the point where she second-guesses every decision no matter if it's the right call or not. The amount of confidence she has in herself is low, to say the least. It reminds me of how I was before going to the clock tower. That doesn't diminish her accomplishments, victories, or intelligence in any way, though given the endless possibilities she has with her quirk, her choice to stick with creating simple things she's already mastered limits what she could accomplish significantly. As she is now, Yaoyorozu is like an endless blank canvas. The potential to create something beautiful is there, and always will be, but the brush is in the hands of someone who doesn't recognize the value of themselves or the canvas in front of them. Without a hand to properly guide them, it's only a matter of time until they disgracefully crash and burn. I only hope that either I or someone closer to her recognizes the deeper issue at play before something irreversible occurs. I thought about a way to end this positively, or with some kind of quip like Sven did back when I talked with him, but with the gravity of the situation I think both would be in bad taste. I'll come back to this with an update once the time for an ultimatum finally comes, but for now I think I need some air for a bit. Next pay. The best way I can describe May would be like a hurricane of innovation who makes things not because it needs to be made, but because she wanted to. Almost all of my time I've spent with her was either chatting about her inventions, helping her with them, and a smaller portion of us just talking to each other about nothing in particular. For most that would seem like a pretty one-sided friendship, but for me who didn't have many actual friends before I made it to UA, and May who puts her all into advancing from where she was the previous day, this is more than enough. In all aspects, May is a genius, certified, though unless you listen to a few of her rants about her inventions it would be pretty difficult to grasp that. Despite everything, I consider her one of, if not, my closest friends, and I'd do anything I can to help her. For someone like May, someone who puts their all into making new babies, as she calls her inventions, you would think she'd be kind of lacking in the strength department, but that's where you'd be wrong. Some of those machines can get pretty heavy, and before I left for the clock tower I could hardly lift some of them. On top of that, she and I helped clean up Takoba Beach, even if most of it was just to get more parts and metal for a few of May's projects at the time, but even after that she stayed to help me pick up anything else that was left over. Last week I went over to the support lab at UA and saw her lug around a pair of boots that had to be at least 22 kilograms when I picked them up. With that in mind I can comfortably say she's way stronger than the average person, and might outdo some of the lower-end pro heroes I've seen in action, so I'd say E+ is a good place to put her. I haven't actually seen May run a lot, despite how odd that sounds. The few times I have it was a pretty short distance, but it was pretty fast. Due to my lacking knowledge here, I'll just use her strength measurement as a baseline and give her an E+ as well. With all of this in mind, you'd expect her to be decently durable, enough to contend with someone like Yaoyorozu at least, but she could probably match up well to someone like Todoroki. There have been countless times where something she was working on exploded with the force of Kaken's regular output, and that's only counting the ones I've been there to witness. While I was at the clock tower, I can guarantee that at least 100 more on that level occurred, and she was right at the epicenter. Hatsum-san and I have tried our best to stop that from happening, but no matter what failsafe we put in place she somehow manages to still make it blow up. It's pretty impressive honestly. When Kaken and I went to see her about the Bakugan just before everything with the USJ happened, another explosion happened, and it ended up blowing the reinforced steel doors to the support lab off their hinges. If she's constantly dealing with things like that, then D+ seems very fair. May is smart, really smart. If she were put up against the top 5 of Class 1AB, then I don't doubt she'd do amazing. Most of that intelligence is put into working on her babies though, so I doubt anything like that would come to fruition unless one of the events at the sports festival was a general knowledge test or something. Not only is she a genius when it comes to mechanical work and engineering, especially since she managed to get that beat-up truck that was dumped on Takoba Beach up and running, but she also knows a lot about coding too. Usually she leaves that up to Hatsum-san, since she herself admitted that he knew way more about that than her, but when the situation calls for it she can certainly do just fine by herself. I've also learned more than a thing or two when watching her coding skills in action. I know the basics since I made a lot of contingencies when I was younger on how I could be a hero when I still believe I was quirkless, but she's definitely way more knowledgeable than me on the subject. I did manage to get her away from her work long enough to get one war simulation in, which honestly surprised me with the outcome. Most of her strategy consisted of waiting in blind spots to ambush my heavier infantry and grouping together her strongest units in order to rush down my commander. Due to the way the game works, being digital and all, every player can choose different units before the match, and her choice of stationary engineers that developed more powerful weapons to snowball every fight until victory was a choice I somehow didn't expect. In the end, I somehow managed to win by diverting all of my forces to protect my commander from her artillery fire, before sending a stealth group that planted explosives all around her base camp and cutting off all of her resources from there. It was tough, but super fun. She said she'd want to make a better strategy and face other people in school and around town before coming back to challenge me again. If I'm right, then I need to step up my game fast and come up with an even better unit loadout, or else I'll lose handily. Her quirk, Scope, is more of an unclassifiable quirk compared to most. When comparing it with her father's tech site, which allows him to see the inner workings of most technology at a glance, you'd expect them to be kind of similar in terms of usage, but that's far from the case, at least on the surface. Both have vestigial eye mutations that change the shape, color, and functions of their eyes. Hatsum-san's makes his iris look like a circuit board, the green, blue and red color to them further adding to that, while Mei's looks like a colored scope that you'd find on something like a long-range rifle. From what she's told me, all it does is give her enhanced vision, allowing her to zoom into the distance at insane degrees, but when comparing father to daughter that just makes no sense. Quirks, on the biological level, are not that complicated, at least in the way that DNA is. The parents' quirks are usually combined within the child in some way that ends up with either one familiar quirk, or something completely different. Kaken would be a perfect example of this, with his explosion, which is a combination of his father's acid sweat that turns his normal sweat into an acidic liquid and gives his palms the ability to ignite that creates small explosions whenever both aspects come together, along with his mother's glycerin, which lets her produce a moisturizing liquid from her skin. There are many other examples of this happening, which should make something that would resemble Hatsum-san's mother or father's quirk impossible. This leads me to believe that, like Yayorozu, there is actually something more to Mei's quirk. I have yet to find anything concrete, but I do have a few ideas. The first was that instead of giving her insight into general technology, she gets insight into all of it, but that doesn't really match with anything she's done. The second was that her eyes only work on things that a mechanic would work on, but again that falls apart when she can flawlessly pinpoint issues with something like a phone. My last idea, the one I'm the most hopeful about, was that it let her know about anything she looked at when using it. Not just technology or cars, but things like materials, clothes, clouds, buildings, and even people, everything. While not as crazy as your body being a living portal to an outer dimensional furnace, that would still be nothing to scoff at. Being able to know the exact details about a metal you're working with, or even the measurements of a person you are making a costume for, all at a single glance. Out of the tens of other ideas I had, this one is by far the soundest. When making Kaken and Ai's armor, Mei didn't even have to ask or take our measurements, she just went on as if she knew it already. For me, you could say that Hatsum-san gave her rough measurements from when they took care of me after the sludge villain incident, but that falls apart when getting to Kaken. Neither of them took his measurements, and Hatsum-san told us outright that the nanobots he injected us with to test our bodies couldn't provide any information other than that, so unless our parents gave it to them, that would be the only explanation. There was also something she mentioned on the night after the entrance exams, right before Percival showed up, that she had great negotiation skills, or something along those lines. That could easily be written off as her name dropping her dad, but from what I know of Mei, she'd never do something like that. Maybe, just maybe, she was able to get the exact information about the large amount of orichalcum she got to make the prototype Bakugan thanks to her quirk providing it, and then used that as leverage to stop whatever inflated price the salesman she spoke to tried to offer, and got it down even more? It could be a lot of things, but I won't know until I ask, and we test, so I'll leave this section here. Mei is hands down one of the most genuine and caring people I've ever met. Behind her hard focus on creating new and better things, she laughs, cries, and gets angry just like the rest of us. She just has a harder time showing that when it doesn't involve making things. Over the less than 2 years that I've known and spoken to her, she always makes it a point to stay engaged with whatever conversation we're having, no matter what she's working on, and how mundane it may be. Getting to have someone that's just there no matter what is an amazing feeling I wouldn't give away for the world. On top of that, she always gives it her all with whatever it is she's working on, never settling for just her best, and always going beyond. I couldn't ask for a better person to call my friend. Until Sage is done, I'll just forego the Magecraft category. I don't really have much else to say about Mei, other than to watch out for her in a fight. She may not be a fighter, but if her quirk works the way I think it does, and if she really feels like it, then she could potentially be a scary opponent. I don't doubt that she'll try her hardest in the sports festival, and if we end up facing each other at some point, then I don't plan on going easy, because I know for a fact she'd do the same. Next Pei. A martial artist with an unshakable will and overwhelming skill, Ojiro is one of the best examples of how a hero should really be. I haven't spoken to him much, mostly because he seems to be avoiding me for some reason, but I'm sure that it's no big deal, hopefully. Ojiro is an interesting case for me. At one moment he puts his all into sparring with me, and the next he avoids me like the plague. I haven't tried to speak with him much since I don't want to make him uncomfortable or anything, but it is a bit worrying. Thankfully, we have sparred during heroics classes, and he participated in the big class battle on the first week, so I do have a relatively good grasp on his abilities. With that in mind, I would probably give him a flat D in strength. He's strong enough that I can vividly picture the sensation from his blows, but not so strong to be on the level of someone like Sato or Shuji. He's also fast, to the point where I might struggle a bit without my quirk. I calculated our scores on the 40-meter dash, and accounted for the boost my quirk gave me, and we would have been evenly matched. I guess I do need to train my physical abilities more, but that's hard to do when I know I could potentially kill myself with my subpar usage of my quirk. That aside, I'd give Ojiro a D+4 speed. As a martial artist, and a skilled one at that, Ojiro's endurance is off the charts, and the control he has over his body is nothing to scoff at. During one of our no-quirk sparring classes, he was able to shrug off Sato's punches without problem, and maneuver around a few of Kaken's blows with ease. I was on the back foot for all of our match, and my lacking skill was the factor that ultimately decided my loss. That goes to show that no matter how strong you are, without the skill to accurately use it, you're just a block of muscle. Maybe I shouldn't have asked Sven for advice, because letting the beast inside rage with fury doesn't seem like sound advice. It does give me some ideas though, so there's one plus. I'd give Ojiro a C+4 endurance, something that makes me dread the practice I had set up with Kendo tomorrow. The fact she could hold her own against Sage using my body for as long as she did means I'm probably going to lose a lot. I wish I had more to go off of for this category, but I doubt that'll happen anytime soon. I do have some things thankfully, but definitely not enough to get a full picture. Ojiro's strategies in battle are something I find myself still tripped up on even after watching videos of our matches at least 10 times over. The way he effortlessly uses his tail to string together strikes, along with his mastery over karate, makes him a tricky opponent to deal with without using a quirk. Thanks to the rules of our spars in class, he couldn't use his tail, but that didn't make him any easier. In fact, it made him a harder fight. I've been able to score a few rounds against him, but those were mostly lucky hits that just so happened to end the fight. I know the main reason is because I don't really have a fighting style I can call my own, just those that I copied from watching others. That's the main reason I've been going out of my way to spar against the entire class, so I can try to get the spark I need to start that first step, but so far I have nothing. Considering I only have a few days until the sports festival, I'll have to come up with something fast and get started right away. I just wish my quirk wasn't so complicated and dangerous. Ojiro is a calm and collected person outside of fights. He always participates in conversation, but doesn't say much otherwise unless he absolutely needs to, at least from what I've observed. Again, I wish I had more to go off of, but he keeps avoiding me. I'm starting to think it's a me issue, but I kind of doubt that. He was open to talking with me during the first week of school, but ever since. I think I know what happened, but it doesn't make me feel any better. The USJ was a horrible experience, but I can't help but to relive it every chance I can, thinking about what I could have done better, and just how bad it could have gone. Despite that, I think this has to do with Percival and Dragonoid, or just the Bakugan in general. Maybe Kaken and I shouldn't have kept it a secret, especially with how divided it's made the class, but what else were we supposed to do? I'm going to try and talk this over with him, and as much of the class as I can either before or after the sports festival, because this is only going to get worse the more Kaken and I don't address this, and I don't want that, not when I've just started anew after the hell I went through when I was younger. While his quirk may not seem like much to write home about, Ojiro's usage of tail makes it perfect for a martial artist like him. I assume he's trained for a long time to get it to move how he wants it to, and being able to mix it so seamlessly into his fighting shows a level of skill that'd normally require multiple decades of experience. On the first day when we introduced ourselves after the quirk apprehension test, he mentioned how his extra appendage didn't even feel like something foreign to him now, alluding to the possibility is did. When he was younger, kind of like how Karuta explained it with his own tail. The build of it shows that it has lots of muscles within it, meaning that it's just as complex as the human body with its functions. My main wonder is if it has better recovery capabilities compared to a normal person, and if that has slowly transferred itself with the rest of his body. I won't be able to test that without either harming him or asking if Hatsum-san could analyze him, but that's still not a major focus, just a minor curiosity. Ojiro is a dangerous opponent. Fighting him without ample preparation and an understanding of karate's fundamentals is ill-advised. He's able to identify attack patterns and how strong someone might be with just a few exchanges. Underestimating him just because his quirk isn't flashy is the exact thing that will lead to your defeat. Next pay, the Master of Darkness, and a terrifying force to reckon with, Kurwaro has absolutely been one of the more interesting people I've met since coming to UA, and definitely on the eccentric side of that. Supposedly, he and Tokoyami have been hanging around behind one of the gyms and practicing occult magic along with Yanagi and Shiro for some odd reason, but who knows what's actually going on. I just want it to be clear, Kurwaro himself told me to add in the part about being the Master of Darkness when he heard about me making entries for the class during a heroics class. That was not me. Compared to your average civilian, Kurwaro would be considered strong, abnormally so, but put up against others in that same category and he's about average, if not a little above that. This isn't to throw shade at him, but compared to the piledriver from Sato, or Kirishima's punches he's just not there. We sparred a bit last week, so I was able to get a better estimate for how strong he is exactly other than the glancing blow he scored when Sage was in control of my body, so with that data I'd give him an E. I'll be splitting the speed section into two parts, one for his normal speed, and the other for his speed when moving with his quirk. To start, Kurwaro's build makes him much better suited to quick movements and weak attacks than the opposite, meaning he's a big step up in his abilities here. Without his quirk, I'd give him a D. With his quirk on the other hand, is a bit tricky. Not tricky in the sense that you can't track him, no. If you pay attention you absolutely can, but you'll always be a step behind thanks to him moving through the darkness. Normally that would be enough to justify a ranking like B+, but it's actually a lot more complicated than that. I'll explain more about just how much more complicated it is, but for now I can safely say that with his quirk, Kurwaro's speed would sit at a comfortable C+. Like I said earlier, Kurwaro isn't suited for prolonged or heavy engagement, meaning his endurance would fall flat compared to the majority of the class, falling somewhere in between Hagakure and Aoyama. This doesn't mean either of them are weak, it just means they're just about at the average of what most heroes perform at, not exceeding or falling below that. The main reason for this also happens to be due to his quirk, similar to how I figured Hagakure's does, just in a different way. Because his body is literally made of darkness, which allows him to meld with and control it, that means no light whatsoever can reach his skin, and his body is at a perpetual deficit of nutrients that the light of the sun provides life on Earth. Luckily, his body has adapted and changed to accommodate that, meaning he requires a separate system of nutrients to fuel and power his body. I don't know the exact changes, nor what exactly he needs, but I do know that's the gist of it. There are certainly ways to circumvent these issues and allow Kurwaro to continuously increase his strength at a rate that could possibly be even higher than that of a normal human, but that requires resources and testing, and both of those need time that we don't have with the sports festival approaching. Black is the name Kurwaro decided upon for his quirk, and it works well, so no notes there. How it works, however, makes it a blessing nothing has ever gone wrong. The explanation he gave, which was the one given to him by whatever counselor he went to, was that he can merge with anything that is dark, or covered in darkness, along with freely move in shadows. For a short description it works, but whoever the person was that gave that as the end-all be-all explanation deserves to be fired and have whatever money they made off of Kurwaro given right back to him and his family. Not only is it entirely wrong, but it's also vastly unprofessional to give such a half-butted answer like that. From what I've had the opportunity to test, his quirk actually works by constantly absorbing photons into his body, the lack of them making his skin the black void that it is, before expunging the energy throughout his internal systems which in turn transforms his body into a zero-mass object. Despite this, he is still bound by how fast he can move his energy through darkness, or other objects absorbing photons. Every moment he is in this state in between matter and energy, he is constantly producing and discharging all of the mass in his body, something that could be fatal if even one thing went wrong. This is also why I said that despite technically moving at the speed of photons, Kurwaro is limited by how fast he can transfer his energy through the darkness he travels through. He still has mass, but it's just being dispersed across the surface of whatever he's moving through as soon as it's produced, creating the ripple effect you can see if you pay close enough attention. Even with this better explanation, there are probably things still wrong about it, and things that should physically be impossible, like him creating mass even if it is with the aid of energy from absorbed photons, but I've given up fully applying physics and science as a whole to quirks. I mentioned it briefly at the beginning of this entry. BTU Kurwaro is eccentric, something that's becoming a pattern the more of these I make. From the way he speaks, to the way he carries himself, I only have one word to describe him: chunny. He and Tokoyami are birds of a feather when it comes to this, but I find that endearing in a way. It's a nice change of pace compared to the sterile seriousness of the clock tower whenever Sven wasn't around, so I say that's good in my books. Really though, I'm just happy to get to know more people. Kurwaro is also smart enough to get the hang of the war simulator after just a few practice rounds. His hit-and-run tactics using highly mobile cavalry along with preparing multiple strike squads to dismantle my key resources and commander was an old but always effective strategy that I'd never fault someone for using. Ultimately I won thanks to a heavy investment in advanced artillery and better weapons to stave off any quick attacks, but it was a nice change of pace compared to Yagi-sensei's brute force rush, or Yayorozu's brain-twisting setups, so I'm glad I experienced it. At the end of it all, Kurwaro is a tricky and dangerous opponent if you don't know what to look out for, and even if you do, his keen intellect might provide a surprise you aren't prepared for. I'm looking forward to how he does in the sports festival, and what moves he might come up with to enhance his usage of his quirk. Who knows, maybe he can find some way to wield the darkness himself instead of becoming it, then truly he'll be the master of darkness. Next pay. Class 1 AB's resident specialist on anything to do with the occult, or horror in general, Yanagi has been a nice contrast to everything happening over the last week or so. I mentioned in Kurwaro's entry that she and some of the others have been practicing occult magic when they're done with training, and that's still happening, but I overheard that group mentioning that they would join up with the school's occult horror club whenever opportunities to join clubs opened up after the sports festival. That honestly might be a good idea for me as well, not joining the occult horror club, but joining the martial arts club. From what I could research, there used to be about 10 different clubs for various martial arts, but eventually all of the club heads came together and combined it into one big club that anyone could join, and then decide which one they wanted to focus on after an initiation phase. I'm hoping I can join multiple, mostly on account of wanting to level up my swordplay, and also gaining more experience to hopefully advance the style I started working on back at the clock tower. Despite her initial appearance, Yanagi is actually pretty strong, scoring within the top 20 of the class in pure strength-related measures. To be fair, that is on the latter half of that scale, but that still doesn't excuse how hard she punches. Since she didn't participate in the battle with the class, I wasn't able to get a full grasp on how strong she was until we started training for the sports festival, and she doesn't disappoint. During one of our spars, I almost lost because I was caught off guard by the weight behind her strikes. When I asked her about it, she just said she puts her all into training, and I can agree with that. Maybe she has one of those sleeper builds like they say in bodybuilding, but I probably shouldn't continue this train of thought. Either way, I can definitely give Yanagi a flat D for strength. Yanagi is also pretty fast, more than enough to exceed someone like Kirishima who relies on pure bulk and brawn to mow through opponents. The 40-meter dash on the first day was a good example of this, and she scored in the top 10 because of it. She can also increase her maneuverability by riding on objects she picks up using her quirk, but she mentioned it being taxing on her mind and soul? I have no idea, but she's fast for sure. Maybe not enough to keep up with someone like Ida, but more than enough for general things. I'll give her an E+. Despite all of what I said previously, endurance is probably her weakest subject. Not because of a lack of stamina, but because her quirk seems to take a lot out of her mentally, which leads to leaving herself undefended against attacks during a longer fight. That was one of the things I noticed during one of the spars Usajiyama-sensei set up for the entire class right when we got back from break after everything with the USJ. We were permitted to use our quirks, something we hadn't been able to before, and that was a glaring weakness that stuck out like a sore thumb. Physically, Yanagi is fit, but her quirk is probably her biggest asset, and her biggest weakness. For that, I'll have to give her an E+. Yanagi's quirk, Poltergeist, is really interesting, mostly on account of it not making any sense. That sounds backwards, but it ironically is the best way to describe it. From her words, it allows her to exert control over an object using mental strength. Probably the most accurate description for a quirk I'm going to get from any of my classmates. In the limited testing we did, I found that the description was apt for how it worked in real time, and the equipment may let me borrow helped in proving that, but I couldn't help but feel like there was more to it. And that's when I discovered it. After going over the projected data a few more times at home, I found that the fluctuations in the signals her brain sent were far out of line compared to those with similar telekinesis quirks within the anonymous profiles Hatsum-san allowed me to use for testing. They were far too low. That could mean a couple different things, but luckily I was able to narrow it down to 3 conclusions, each of them so ridiculous that they were the perfect explanation. If you can't tell, I'm salty. Because I previously thought quirks were a purely biological phenomenon that could be sufficiently understood through scientific means, but obviously I was wrong. The first conclusion I came to was that instead of telekinesis, poltergeist was actually arranged gravitational control. Effectively the same thing, but a different classification. This was thrown away due to the fact that the objects Yanagi used it on were still governed by gravity, and had weight, meaning it was more like her ordering an invisible flying thing to lift things and carry them through the air. Shooting off from that, my second explanation was that the quirk wasn't telekinesis or gravity control, but force manipulation. That would mean that every action she takes would just be her exerting a physical force onto the object using her mind, and using controlled bursts to move, fling, and stop the object. That was also discarded, but for reasons separate to the first one. If that was in fact the case, then her brain would be operating at levels high above telekinesis, something that doesn't make sense when looking at the recorded data, but also would require a level of control that Yanagi herself said she doesn't need when using it, stating verbatim, "It's more of an intuition thing. I don't really think about it that much, and instead just do it." So with those 2 ruled out, that brings me to the last, and most deranged of my conclusions, yet the one that somehow makes the most sense in regards to everything explained before. Poltergeist is a purely metaphysical quirk that uses Yanagi's soul in order to exert control over objects, just as she said before. That helps with explaining why her brain isn't exceeding the threshold derivative associated with telekinesis and gravity quirks, and also explain why usage feels more intuitive than anything else. To add on to that, it could also give reasoning as to why she feels so drained during usage. She's drawing directly on her soul, and the more she does so it could be draining her life force or something. It's probably not that dangerous, and instead is just that she needs to train so she can get used to it, and eventually overcome it. I have a few ideas in mind for how to do so, but it will definitely involve Yaoyorozu's dimensional furnace, Kurwaro's photon absorption, and seeing if Mei or Hatsum-san have some sort of machine that can transport Yanagi and I into a metaphysical realm in order to get a look at the structure of souls. We could probably do it with just the first 2, but it's always nice to have insurance. Moving aside from the mind-boggling reality of quirks, Yanagi is really smart. Not only is she battle-sound, but also practically intelligent. We played a few games of the war simulator, and I can confidently say that with a bit of practice she'd be able to match me pretty evenly. Her strategy was a healthy composition of well-placed scare tactics to prevent me from attacking key resources without thinking twice, along with a strong battering ram formation for her main forces in order to break my formation apart with minimal losses. It would have worked, if not for her ignoring the strike team I sent on horseback to take out her commander just moments before mine went down. The other games were a back and forth, with her taking the second, and the last ending in a tie because our commanders were the last ones standing and killed each other at the same time. I didn't even know that could happen, but I definitely look forward to playing with her more. Yanagi is an interesting person, just like her quirk, and I can't say I dislike that. When she's not quietly chatting with the occult squad, she'd usually chatting animatedly with someone about anything interesting. My first impression of her was someone that seemed distant from everyone else, like Todoroki, but I couldn't have been more wrong. I've kind of built a reputation of being the quirk guy because of my unintentional mutter sessions when I get excited over a new quirk I get the opportunity to learn about, and a small group seems to be forming around me thanks to it. At first it was just Yaoyorozu because she said she was interested in my analysis on her and others, but then it extended to include Jairu, who joined because it sounded interesting, Hananuki, Tokage, Uraraka, and Yanagi. All of them look genuinely interested in what I have to say, and don't seem to mind my analysis and muttering. It's refreshing. Nothing compared to the other schools I've been to. I just hope everything with the Bakugan doesn't become a major issue after Kaken and I tell everyone about it after the sports festival. And that's everything. I think once she gets over the hurdle of her quirk, Yanagi will be a major opponent to look out for. Even without it, her physical stats are crazy. While she might struggle against someone like Kirishima who can handle her punches, if she has more of a handle over martial arts of any kind, then I can see her doing really well against Kamakiri or Karuta. Next pay. For someone so strict, having the ability to freely move at speeds most could never even dream of has got to be some kind of irony the world just decided to drop one day, but I appreciate it, nonetheless. While Ida may be a bit overbearing sometimes, I can tell it genuinely comes from a place of care. I just wish I'd stop being the subject of it. Despite not having the punching power of his older brother, Ingenium, due to his engine mutation being on his calves and not his elbows, his kicks will have you wishing he did. It's clear Ida takes his training very seriously, just like pretty much everything, and that makes his non-quirk enhanced kicks still pack enough punch to hurt. His upper body is still plenty strong too, but his specialties are a very obvious statement. Based on my personal experience, and reviewing any physical scores from the first week of school, giving him AB seems about right. Up next is his endurance, something that's important for speedy heroes. I got a rundown of the training regimen he does daily to keep improving his stamina, and it's intense. Just remembering it will probably make Lord El Meloy too angry he didn't think to add on more to the hell he put me through. Even without that prior knowledge, just knowing he was able to run all the way to the main UA campus from the USJ in a bit under 3 minutes without breaks at his full speed was more than enough to convince me he deserves an A-. Now we're on to his speed, and a big contributor to my ranking has to do with what I mentioned in the endurance section, along with a combination of the quirk apprehension test and the few races he and I did to test ourselves even more. It'd take a lot to go through every individual calculation I did, so I'll just keep it to 2, the first one being his race to reach the main campus of UA from the USJ. I estimated he had to have moved at around supersonic speeds in order to travel the nearly 15 kilometers in what he himself said was only 36 seconds. The speed sensors on the track we used to race said he might have even exceeded that previous speed, reaching more than double that value, and considering this happened 2 weeks after the USJ incident, for him to improve at such a crazy rate is insane. Based on all of the evidence I have, B, or even just B is more than fair. Ida's quirk, while simple in design and function, is used masterfully in his hands. Engine does just as it implies and gives the wielder a set of mufflers like those found on the engines of American muscle cars, that can protrude from different parts of the body depending on the user used to amplify speed and striking power. There's no odd quirk science I can see going on with it from my observation, other than that the consumption of different citrus-based drinks acts as fuel and a sort of turbocharge. Maybe if he tried drinking different fruit drinks, he'll get a proportionate increase-decrease in function? The only other drink he admitted to drinking other than orange juice and water has been grape juice, and apparently it turned his mufflers purple and made them emit pink flames and smoke? It needs more workshopping, but something is definitely there. Other than that and some kind of procedure that involves removing his mufflers and letting them grow back after significant strain on his quirk to improve them in pretty much every way you can imagine. I've heard of similar procedures with other types of quirks, but I'm not really sure it would work other than be extremely painful, but who am I to question a tradition in a family of heroes that has been around since the dark ages of quirks? Ida is smart, something most might interpret from taking one look at him and seeing how he acts for about a minute. It's not something he really tries to hide, or intend to flaunt, just how he's always acted according to him. His strict and quick thinking also seems to be reflected there as well, if his efficiency when it came to strategy was anything to go by. Uniform strikes that could easily pin down and punish any out-of-position troops in the war simulator we played, and swift hit-and-run tactics that could take me out in one fell swoop if I made a single mistake, something that happened a lot. His strategy, while simple overall, was mastered quickly, and able to utterly destroy my commander. I won't make any excuses, even if I was trying out a new lineup of units, I couldn't do anything against him. It got close a few times, but ultimately the win was just out of reach for me. I'll try experimenting with different plans and strategies, but I think what I need is something that can fully embody my own style of fighting, which I'm still trying to figure out. On the surface, Ida seems to be pretty one-dimensional, but I don't like to judge a book by its cover unless it gives me a good reason to, and he definitely doesn't strike me as that type. I heard he grew up around Yaoyorozu, and Todoroki though to a lesser degree, so maybe asking one of them about how he really is might be a good idea, but they seem like they're going through a lot already. Kendo also alluded to knowing something about it a few days ago during one of our spars, but she didn't explain further, only saying, "You'll have to ask him yourself." So I left it there. Even with that tidbit of information not so easily accessible, I can confidently say that he's becoming a good friend no matter how strict he can be at times. He's going to be an opponent I have to look out for in the sports festival, because I can feel that he has some kind of trick up his sleeve for it. Good thing I do too. Just a few more days until it finally starts though, and there I'll get to see the results of this crazy training I put myself through. Next pay. As one of the more skilled, if not the most skilled, fighter in Class 1AB, it's safe to say that Kendo is high in the rankings on who is the strongest among us all. After a few spars, both using our quirks and not, I can safely say that I'm nowhere near as skilled as her. I may have raw strength and big bursts of power that can win a fight if used correctly, but her precision and strength combined prove to be something that puts me on the back foot more often than not. We've been sparring pretty frequently in order to improve ourselves faster than we would alone, but even that isn't enough to close the gap in skill. On one hand, I'm happy that I can fight such strong people and continue to improve, even if it's slow, but on the other hand I can't help but feel frustrated with myself. Even with the few weeks since the start of the school year, along with the time I spent at the clock tower, nothing seems to stick when it comes to developing a style of fighting unique to me. Sure, I have a basic grasp over a decent chunk of what goes into martial arts, but that means nothing if I can't use it effectively. I'll take it a bit easier for now though, because who knows, maybe all I need is a spark of inspiration. Like I mentioned before, Kendo is strong. During the Quirk apprehension test, which seems like it was forever ago despite only 3 weeks passing, her scores on the ball throw and grip test were 335 meters and 63.51 kilograms of force, something that put her a bit above the middle of the pack. On top of that, once the full score breakdown from the entrance exams was released, all of the class save a few decided to compare how they did. From that, I was able to see that she got pretty high scores on the striking force test. It had 3 individual scores, one for each machine we hit, and they had 3 different ranges depending on which one you hit. The easy robot scored from 0 to 1000, medium 0 to 3000, and hard 0. On the first, Kendo scored a perfect 1000 points, as did the majority of others in the class. For the second, her score was again high, but not perfect, getting A, and the last was just about at what seemed to be the all-around average of the class at when put in combination with the spars I've had with her, and walked away with more than a few bruises after the fact. Either C+ or B seems more than justified for her strength ranking. Other than her strength and skill, endurance is the area where Kendo really starts to shine. She can walk off hits from someone like Shuji, who can partially break through Kirishima's adaptive hardening at his strongest, as well as match me pretty well, which could be seen from the class battle footage. According to her, she was the last one standing after the Warp Sentinel attacked until Todoroki came in and beat it. Even if she was just able to take one hit from it, that was something that destroyed the top of the main mountain in the mountain zone. More than impressive if you ask me. She also lasted pretty long in the long-distance run from the Quirk apprehension test, getting to about 14 laps around the entire track before dropping out in exhaustion. That should be more than enough for her to qualify for a baseline B-. Moving on to her speed, this is where Kendo's all-rounder specialties become even more pronounced. Normally people are strong specialize in 1, maybe 2 or 3 categories. Take Kirishima, Ida, and Yaoyorozu for example. Kirishima has amazing endurance and physical strength, but that momentum falls a bit flat once you reach Quirk control, speed, and general intelligence. Compare that to Yaoyorozu, whose precision with her Quirk and general intelligence is among the top of the class, yet doesn't have the insane strength, speed, and endurance as everyone else. And Ida is much the same, excelling in speed, general intelligence, and endurance, but isn't particularly standout with his strength without his Quirk, and has a hard time moving fluidly with it. This is to say, that despite that being a pattern that can be observed and applied to pretty much everybody, there are some that exceed, fall short, or are just about average in regards to all 5 of the categories I use. Kendo would be on the former end of that scale, either fully excelling, or being a decent bit above average in everything. While not on the absurd levels of someone like All Might or Hawks, or even far above most like Ida, Kendo's speed is nothing to scoff at. Her time on the 50-meter dash in the apprehension test was 3.6 seconds on the dot, and after the USJ increased to 2.73 seconds. To add on to that, she was more than capable of reacting to a few of Kaken's more powerful explosions, and able to mostly dodge Ida's Quirk-boosted kicks. For that, I'd give her a C or C+. Big Fist is the name of Kendo's Quirk, another type similar to Ojiro's that seems to function just as its name would suggest, make her fists bigger. While that would be correct from a simple glance over and demonstration, this is another of the quirks that I've dedicated more time than anyone reasonably should to get to the meat of what's really going on. My findings have been interesting, to say the least, but before that it'd be good to give the full description Kendo herself gave me. According to the Quirk specialist she saw from 4 to 6 years old, her Quirk allows her to inflate her hands like balloons, increasing their size based on her own adjustment and muscle strength relative to how large she makes them. Better than most of the others in the class, but not enough for me. Despite that, it did help bring me to just one conclusion out of 14,605 that made the most sense. The initial assessment is more or less correct, however, only if one were to argue for semantics. The Quirk specialist she went to had the right idea, but his observations were too narrow, and didn't bother to look anywhere else. Instead of just ballooning her fists, Kendo's entire body is like that of a balloon, or more accurately rubber. Based on how she reacted to blunt attacks that would normally hurt a normal person but didn't for her, and examining the way force traveled through her skin similar to how a tire would cause things to rebound off of it, it was clear something like that was the case. The real identity of her quirk is more likely than not some mutated form of a gigantification and some kind of quirk that allows the user to stretch their limbs like gum. This would also function as an indirect explanation as to why she can increase the size and, to a lesser degree, strength of her fists, though the latter is still enough of an oddity that the only explanation that can fully make sense of it would just be more evidence that quirks make absolutely no sense. Kendo is no slouch when it comes to strategy or intelligence as well. There's a reason she was estimated to be one of the top contenders for smartest in the class, and our games proved that. She used a total of 3 strategies, one for each game, and her proficiency using all of them was awe-inspiring to witness, especially as the one who had to go against her. I also used the chance to test a few strategies. The first game was a fight for complete dominance over each other, and both of us decided to go with compositions that prioritized engaging in as many fights all at once to capture key targets on the battlefield. That one ended in my victory. Our second game was almost a complete 180 from the first, with both of us using strategies that rewarded hit-and-run battles and stealth strikes on enemy resources respectively. Despite winning more skirmishes than her, ultimately I lost in the end thanks to sending all of my best teams out to take her bases, leaving my commander pretty much undefended. The final game was even more interesting, Kendo using bluffs and purposeful misdirection to keep me away from her important squads and commander, whereas I went for complete control over the entire battlefield that let me quickly react and redistribute forces thanks to how many I had. That game ended in a tie, a combination of slight overextension on Kendo's part that let me strike her commander down before she could course correct, along with an overly hasty to send my own commander towards an unoccupied resource area, not knowing it was an ambush she had planned from the first few battles of the game. I could tell afterwards that both of us were exhausted, mostly due to the nearly 2-hour length of the third game, so that's where we called it quits. It may have been the longest game I've played, but it was definitely fun. I can't wait to see what other strategies Kendo comes up with whenever we play again. Out of everyone in class, Kendo is probably the one I'd least expect to be capable of using Magecraft right behind Ojiro, but at this point I've stopped assuming anything. It's been genuinely enjoyable getting to know Kendo, and all of the others in the class these last few weeks. Not only is she already becoming a good friend in my eyes, but our sparring and training sessions have helped the both of us grow in ways that wouldn't have happened as fast otherwise. Her love for martial arts is something completely new for me, but that doesn't stop it from being an enjoyable learning experience. I've also started to notice a unique dynamic forming around her. If there were 3 positions for class president, with how helpful she is, she'd absolutely end up taking it. We actually met outside of school just after the USJ incident, coincidentally right when I was looking for a way to further my martial arts skill. I have to admit, seeing her staring angrily at the ground in front of her family's dojo was pretty uncharacteristic and jarring compared to how she is in class, but in an endearing way. Either way, with her and everyone else around, I have no doubt these next few years at UA will be amazing. Villain attack that almost got half of us killed notwithstanding. I've had to work in overdrive to get these next few entries finished due to the sports festival being just 2 days away, and Kendo's is the last of them before then. I still don't know exactly how this mystic code functions, but I'm pretty sure it orders the pages based on the date I finish writing it, as well as slight input on my part. I did start working on revising and cutting a few of my earlier analysis using this new metric I've made, as well as revising the metric itself. Hopefully whenever those are finished, the pages will sort themselves based on the configuration I had before, but I'm not sure. That aside, Kendo is going to be a tough opponent in the sports festival, and I have no doubt she'll do awesome. I still have a few more last-minute training sessions I want to do alone, that way I can be certain I did everything I could to be ready. Next page. Coming back to the memories and data I got from fighting Amiya-san feels like a blast to the past. To think it's been a little over 2 years since that day I first arrived at the clock tower is melancholic in a way. Not that it feels bad, more so it just feels like it was a lifetime ago, and not 2 years ago. That's enough for now, let's get back to analysis mode. I left a lot out of my first entry on Amiya-san, specifically going into detail about a lot of things, so I'll get right to this revision. It'll be a bit harder to get truly accurate rankings on each category thanks to not having a more recent reference point, but I should be able to make do for now. Amiya-san was a strong opponent, especially for someone as scrawny as I was back then. Even now I have trouble imagining me beating him, but regardless of that, his strength should be the easiest to measure. The hard light training room in the clock tower is not only capable of mimicking a person down to AT so long as the data on them is sufficient, but it is also capable of artificially weakening said projection and creating environments that are more or less a one-to-one copy of any place chosen. I fought Amiya in 3 different locations: a flat plain with nothing but grass, a heavily forested area filled with trees that mirrored the density and strength of those in real life, and a small clearing in a mountainous area. This is important due to the fact that without a relative reference point for his physical capabilities, I have to improvise a bit. He was capable of slicing trees down, and pretty much obliterating them even while artificially weaker. Amiya also showed the capability to partially crater the ground with a punch, even with the grass softening the impact, as well as casually crushing rocks with a kick. There were also more than one occasions where he was able to break human bones. I'll let you guess whose they were. Based on this, and also giving the benefit of doubt thanks to his physical abilities being weakened thanks to the hard light training room, I'll say that his baseline strength should be at around AD, with a possible maximum being C-. Accounting for how much he might have improved in the years since he was just barely out of high school, that range increases to D at his weakest to S at his absolute strongest in the present. Moving on is speed, and Amiya should follow the same ranking pattern here. During one of the first fights I had with him, I remember not even being able to keep track of his movements, whether that was because I was untrained, he was too fast, or both doesn't make much difference. Since I only have reactions and general combat capabilities to go off of, I won't have much practical evidence to support this category in specific, but it shouldn't be too far off what he should be able to do. He was able to cross the about 20-meter distance between the two of us in the blink of an eye, as well as effortlessly dodge multiple trees about to collapse on top of him. Along with that, he should at a baseline be on the same level as the majority of the class right now for a more recent comparison. This should be good enough to rank from D+ at a baseline to C+ at his maximum, and even higher as of now, increasing to C and S-. Amiya was also more than capable of taking a good hit, especially after Sensei upped the difficulty of my training towards the end of my time at the clock tower. Supposedly, the one I fought during my pseudo-gauntlet of battles was him at around the true strength he had at my age. That was no joke. Compared to the weakened and limited version I fought during my first few weeks at the clock tower, the one I fought then was on a completely different level. That was the main reason I used ranges for his rankings, and why they were so drastic. At a baseline, Amiya should be capable of taking hits at about the same level as he can dish out, if not a bit more thanks to his tenacity. At his maximum, he should be about equal with Kendo, possibly higher. He was able to take a punch from me at full power without my quirk, which was able to put a dent in a reinforced wall after I accidentally hit it earlier that day, and walk it off looking no worse for wear. Not only that, but Sensei decided to put me in an all-out 4-way battle with him and 2 others close to us in ability, and in that he was able to walk off getting hit in the chest with a large rock launched like a cannonball. I still don't even know where the rock came from. Based on this, C, to a maximum of AB is more than reasonable. This would only increase with age, meaning something like C+ to S is a lot more likely should I rank him in the present. I noticed that I really downplayed Amiya's intelligence and ability to strategize in my last version of this, and looking back on it, I'll have to apologize to the real Amiya if I ever see him. While I don't have the typical way of breaking down this category, I can still go based off of how he planned in the middle of battle. While he was more of a fight and keep fighting until you win kind of opponent, that didn't mean he wasn't planning. During the first fight I ever had with him, I lost because he used a more powerful attack as a smokescreen to mask him swiftly setting up a pitfall. He also had the skill to know exactly where I was no matter what had happened, almost as if he had some kind of supervision. While not always the most unique, his strategies were effective when they worked, and his battlefield awareness is on a completely different level. I don't recall Sensei ever mentioning his quirk, or anything about it, so I have absolutely nothing about it. There's the possibility it could be related to his projection magecraft, but I'm not sure how likely that is. I read through a book that said magecraft and quirks might be linked together in some capacity, but everyone I asked had either never heard about it, didn't care that much, or just outright stated it was false. I'm not sure what to believe, but as soon as Sage releases my magic circuits, I'm absolutely going to study that more. The real meat of this is in Amiya's magecraft. He has 2 specialties that I've observed: projection magecraft, like I mentioned above, and reinforcement. These 2 seem to be related to each other loosely, but the former is what I want to focus on. Amiya's projection magecraft seems to be different compared to the kind I've researched on an almost metaphysical level. Whereas normally projected objects don't last long due to the rules of magecraft, Amiya's was capable of keeping one of the weapons he created for as long as he wanted, so long as he didn't dismiss it. The weapons themselves were also strangely unique, almost like they were completely unnatural. That sounds like a strange way of phrasing it, but it's the only thing that really makes sense. When I asked Sensei about it, he told me he was more than happy to let me fight Amiya for longer, and even told me to try and replicate it if I was up to it. And that I did. I spent most of my time outside of training to see exactly what was going on, and even with 6 months of research I was only able to figure out 3 things. The first was that this was obviously not just your regular projection magecraft, second being a notebook that had been left behind for at least a few months in one of the more remote training rooms that just so happened to focus on this exact subject, and third was 2 words, trace on. Even now, almost a year and a half later, I'm still stumped on what's exactly going on, and trying to find out is even harder not being able to use my circuits to practice. Moving on, reinforcement is pretty self-explanatory, but surprisingly the second hardest thing I had learned. It takes the basic properties of enhancing an object to the extreme, making it so even a paper roll could become a crazy durable and deadly weapon. At least, at its highest forms. Amiya seemed to have a good grasp over it, same with Tosaka Rin, another person I faced in the hard light training room, but using it on anything other than my body is difficult for me. It's just too unstable for me to use it effectively. On top of those 2, he seemed to possess something even greater than either that I was unfortunately unable to see. Sensei called it a reality marble, and gave me a quick lesson on it after shutting off the projection, but didn't elaborate more on it after that. I want to know more about that in particular, along with his unique offshoot of projection magecraft, because that crazy buildup of mana I felt was unlike anything I've ever faced from another magi. The hard light training room did have the capability to reflect the personality of whomever it projected, and from that I do have a general idea of how Amiya acts, but it doesn't seem very accurate. But in lieu of a better assessment, I'll just use it until someone can give me a better idea of who exactly he is. Amiya was quiet, but not in a bad way, just reserved until something directly called for his attention, like a fight. He definitely was far more observant than what he led others to believe, but not to such a degree that it felt judgmental, just wary. In battle, he was always looking for ways to keep pushing forward, even when trapped in the jaws of defeat. He was also respectful, something I faced more often than not. Even without a true look into his character, I can tell that Amiya-san is a nice person, and I'd be more than happy to make friends with the real version of him if this is his projected version. It's safe to say that Amiya is a crafty and very versatile opponent. In every battle we had, I was forced onto the back foot just due to the sheer number of weapons he created and could wield with proficiency. His projection magecraft and reinforcement are a deadly combination when used together, and that mysterious reality marble of his adds an entirely new layer to his maximum capabilities. I hope I can meet him out in the real world one day, and have a real fight to see just how powerful he really is. Next pay. It only just occurred to me as I was writing this that I didn't have an entry on Kurutakuin or most of the class for that matter with these new guidelines. I guess this is my opportunity to do that. Despite knowing him for the past month or so, I've never had a real moment to actually talk with Kurutakuin much outside of the entrance exams and a bit in the USJ. We've just been so busy with everything going off the rails that it started to become impossible to talk with anyone unless you practically live with them, kind of like Kaken, Mei, and I. I did manage to get to know most of the class during the break we've had until the sports festival, as well as the week we had to take off after the USJ incident went down, but among everyone Kurutakuin is among the most elusive. This might be mixing it up a bit too much, but I think it's for the best if I start with Kurutakuin's quirk before anything else. Bakaniko is an interesting quirk from a glance, and utterly suspicious when you get any closer. I'm not saying Kuruta himself is suspicious, but the explanation of his quirk compared to what he himself has done makes no sense unless he's lying about it. I know someone reading this might call me a hypocrite considering I've been doing the same thing with my own quirk, and even more apart from that, but I'm not trying to fault him for that. After everything that's happened, I don't blame him for taking the cautious road out. That's the reason why this entire notebook is written in a code that only I know how to fully decipher. From the explanation he gave back during the entrance exams, Bakaniko makes him just that, a Bakaniko. He gains the ears and tail of a cat in place of normal human ears and nothing else on his lower back, as well as abilities that seem really out of place when compared to the yokai namesake. Based on first-hand accounts from some of our classmates, he seems to have some form of light or energy manipulation, along with a minor subset of teleportation. I haven't personally seen any of these abilities in action, other than him sharpening and elongating his nails into claws, so I don't have much to go off of. If these things are true, then there is a lot he hasn't said about his quirk. It really feels like he's purposefully avoiding showing me everything about his quirk, and just him in general, something that is becoming a very annoying trend in the class. Either way, I do have some theories about what he could do based off of the information I do have. Maybe he wasn't fully lying about his quirk, and does have some way of shapeshifting like a Bakuniko. It's definitely possible, and absolutely interesting to think about, but he hasn't mentioned anything about it or shown it off whatsoever. My next theory was that he didn't even know the full power of his quirk, but that doesn't make any sense for obvious reasons. I was really grasping at straws here, but what else was I supposed to do? The last possibility is something that absolutely makes no sense, and more than likely holds no basis in reality, but I was desperate and really sleep-deprived trying to come up with literally anything. What if he doesn't even have a quirk? What if he has a power outside of the things I'm even considering? I mean, we have magecraft, the closest thing to actual magic, and whatever the hell else is out there. There are even arguments you can make that quirks are just some variants of metaphysical transcendence, something that can be backed up by the existence of an entire possibly infinite dimension that only Yaoyorozu can directly access through her body, and Yanagi's quirk giving her the ability to control things using her soul. That alone is more than enough for me. Just the fact alone that Yanagi is able to utilize her soul, something that already involves hundreds of levels of metaphysical control, should support the existence of powers that originate far removed from what we are capable of perceiving. Magecraft itself also involves multiple factors that should be outside the bounds of reality, like the countless near-reality warping spells that Magi can just throw out on a random Tuesday, as well as the entire Holy Grail war things I've only barely scratched the surface of researching. With all of that in mind, it is somehow very plausible that Karuta possesses a power that isn't connected to magecraft or quirks in any way. Maybe it even has something to do with that mysterious power All Might used to defeat the Nomu at the USJ? I can definitely see that being a possibility. I think Principal Nedzu called it deviation? Either way, I need to do more research and get to the bottom of this, because who knows what's going on. Now that long and very unhinged rant is over, we can get to everything else. Starting with his endurance. Karuta is definitely top of the class here, though the way he shows itself is kind of the opposite of someone like Kirishima or Tetsutetsu. Karuta focuses more on swift evasive maneuvers that allow him to easily dodge blows that would normally be deadly. I've had more than my fair share of losses in spars thanks to his quick movements, making it nearly impossible to land anything more than a glancing blow. After the USJ incident, during the meeting that was held to discuss everything that had occurred, everyone that managed to stay up on the landing platform near the entrance noted how Karuta was able to dodge beams and blows from Arius, a villain that even gave Usajiyama-sensei trouble. That should be enough to give him a comfortable B+. His strength is a category where he doesn't stand out as much, but still has more than enough to be a monster if you let him. He scored high in the entrance exams practical, landing just behind me in total points, but around 5th when only taking villain points and the points scored from the 5 tests beforehand. During the grip test for the Quirk aptitude test, he got 50 kgs above average but not really breakout and managed to throw the ball 240.5 meters in that test. It's not exactly his best category considering he seems to switch between ranged fire using his light energy manipulation and close scratches and slashes using his claws. I've only taken a few direct punches during our spars, and they felt just a bit weaker than Kendo's punches, and closer but a bit stronger than Ojiro's strikes. Based on that, I'll give him a C, or just a C. His speed is in contention for his best category, and might even be comparable to someone like Ida, who's generally noted to be the fastest in the class. I won't be counting his minor teleportation as a part of his speed here because I don't know how it works for one, but that's not really something that can be considered actual speed. For starters, he was able to get a time equal to Ida and I's during the 50-meter dash, 2.53 seconds. He actually got an even lower score with his teleportation, 0.52 seconds, but he also did another afterwards when Takami-sensei asked him to. To add on, he was also able to dodge Arius lasers pretty handily according to Kodai and others. I can't say for certain how fast they moved, but considering it sounded like it had properties similar to Aoyama's naval laser, which I personally discovered to just be actual photons after a few tests with Kurwaro to confirm how his quirk worked, but that definitely would have to be at a non-zero percentage of the speed of light. Therefore, the same would apply to Karuta. Just to be safe, I'll give him a B-. Every day that passes, I can kind of feel a bit of my mana sensitivity come back to me, though it's very subtle. I think Sage will be done with the seal by the end of the sports festival weekend, meaning I'll finally be able to go more in depth into these entries. For now though, I can say for certain that my initial assessment of Karuta's Magi capabilities were off. Even with the minuscule amount of mana sensitivity I have right now, the sheer volume of it pouring off of him in droves is insane. Using the words of Sensei here, it felt like I was staring into a void of pure mana. I don't know how I didn't catch this at all, but it seemed like it was only as apparent for less than a second, before he put a lid on it. I'll say it again, I was wrong. He definitely has the makings of a Magus, a really strong one at that. Kuruda is cunning, that I can say for sure. I may not have had the chance to play a few simulations with him, but even just a few spars with him proves how tricky he can be. It kind of felt like I was fighting a physically weaker version of Kaken, minus the explosions. I really wish I had more to go off of, but until everyone, including myself, stops with all the avoidance and secrecy, I won't be getting anywhere anytime soon. Like his quirk, Kuruda is really interesting. He first came off as an aloof guy who was very boisterous, and that hasn't changed, but that part of his personality has gotten really subdued after the entrance exams. He's become more closed off compared to how he seemed at first. It's really complicating trying to get to know someone when they don't want you to do that. I'll keep trying, but something has to change eventually, and I don't think anyone will like it. It's basically a guarantee that Kuruda will make it to the final event of the sports festival. Maybe there I can get answers, because I have a nagging feeling that we'll be facing each other. I don't know what I'll learn, if I even do, but it's something that has to happen. I can feel it. No matter what happens, I'll be sure to give him a good fight. Next pay. Coming back, the first entry I made on a servant really has been a weird, but interesting experience. If you told me back when I was 4 years old that I'd be fighting a manifestation of a person that's had a hand in shaping the world as it is now when I was 14, I'd call you insane and delusional, but here I am 2 years after that, having fought even more. To be fair, Archer was significantly weaker than when he first manifested in the 5th Holy Grail War nearly 20 years ago, because otherwise I'd instantly lose something Elmeloy-sensei showed me when I first started fighting against Archer and never have the chance to learn or grow from the training I went through. Similar to Amiya-san, Sensei turned up the difficulty and increased the amount of strength that was translated into the hard light projectors, so I'll have this one be identical with the ranges of each category like I did there. All of this does make me wonder though, how are people chosen to be heroic spirits? Could All Might, or other heroes in the modern day become heroic spirits? Things to consider for later. Going based off of whatever personal experience I can remember, as well as my notes, Archer should be capable of ripping steel apart with his bare hands at the absolute lowest ends of his power. On top of that, when using his bow and projection magecraft skill, whatever weapon he creates then overloads the mana of is able to reduce a 2-story building to dust. Instead of the 3 areas I fought Amiya-san in, I only fought Archer in a modern cityscape, meaning unless I got in close, there was no way I'd survive him thanks to being an Archer-class servant. The reason I just call him by his class is because I don't know his name, but reading through all of my notes is giving me some hints as to what it might be. Regardless, at his maximum, he should be about 50 to 100 times stronger than the previous measurements, as he destroyed a building with a kick in the very last fight I had with him, and blew apart a city block with a shot from his bow that same fight. I put maximum in quotation marks, because this is nowhere near what his true peak strength actually is, and is only the limit I personally saw. The real Archer would probably be thousands of times stronger than this assessment. With that added context, Archer more than easily deserves a C, at minimum, and he shoots up to A+ at his max, though he can likely go even further than that. For speed, Archer is easily one of the fastest people I've ever fought, even up to now, though the Bakugan make an easy contender for that spot. I remember watching the footage of my first fight with him, the one where Sensei put him to the max setting that I fought towards the end of my time at the clock tower, and he was easily able to circle me at least 10 times before he went for the kill. All of that happened before I could even blink in the match itself. It makes me wonder how Elmeloy-sensei stopped him in time. Either way, even if I was super scrawny back then, he'd still have to be moving at well into the tens of thousands of kilometers a second considering the circumference of each circle he made around me. For his absolute lowest, moving faster than someone like Ida who can run faster than a fighter jet is light work. In the first actual fight I had with Archer, he was able to cross about half of a city in mere seconds to reach me. Based on that, as well as assuming his strength increase-decrease also applies to how fast he can move, I'd give Archer C to S for speed, with the possibility to go even higher. Endurance in a servant is a factor that isn't really fair to measure, at least when comparing them with regular humans. While they can still get hurt, you'll have to put a lot of effort in to do so. Mind you, they don't run on normal stamina rules like humans do. The best comparison for this would be the Bakugan, since they function almost identically. Servants are able to manifest, use skills and noble phantasms, as well as a myriad of other things with mana, like how the Bakugan need quirk energy to manifest into their true forms. With a steady supply of mana, servants should be able to fight and function for an indefinite amount of time. There are obvious caveats to this, like when using their signature noble phantasm or healing themselves from near-fatal damage multiple times in a row without a dedicated regeneration skill. In those cases, their capabilities could be limited, but more often than not, it won't get to that pretty much ever. So, accounting for regular defenses outside of pure stamina, I'd give Archer a B+. Putting stamina into the equation that instantly brings it up to SSS, or basically infinite. Archer's intelligence is not something to play with. Whenever I fought him, I pretty much gave up on ever catching him in a trap, or being able to fully outsmart him without doing something really dumb. He was like Amiya-san in how he seemed to have complete awareness over everything that happened in the city, but stepped up to it really felt like he knew everything. Even taking a slight step to the side so I could get a better position made him readjust completely and come at me from all types of angles. Is that what fighting Principal Nedzu is like? If so, then I shudder at the idea of ever having to fight him. I'll stay on his good side for as long as I can. For this one, I'm really doubting if a quirk could even be a possibility. The entire theory I had for quirks and magecraft being connected is still in play, I just don't think it's a factor for servants though. I don't know much about servants or heroic spirits, it was one of the things Elmeloy-sensei told me to research on my own, and I was too caught up in my own quirk to make any good progress on it. He could have a quirk, he could not. I just have no idea. This is where things get really juicy, magecraft. I want to start by saying that although I'm using the same category name for it, I'm pretty sure there's a difference between servant magecraft and human magecraft. I'll start with his signature servant skill, projection magecraft. It works almost identical to Amiya-san. Scratch that, it's pretty much the same thing, Archer just has a far better grasp on it than Amiya-san does. I guess that means I could learn it too if two separate people can. Thanks to him being in the Archer class of servants, Archer also uses the class-specific skills in tandem with his projection. Magecraft to turn the weapons he creates into arrows he can fire at will. He also often overcharges the weapons with a surplus of mana which then causes them to explode on impact, creating a devastating attack. Despite being an archer, he seems to favor close-quarters combat, creating a pair of daggers for fast relentless attacks. Amiya-san creates those same daggers with his own magecraft, maybe he saw them at one point? Perhaps he was in the 5th Holy Grail War along with Archer, and he saw them used there? Too many theories, and nothing to confirm any of them. He was also reported to be capable of acting independently from his master in the Holy Grail War thanks to a skill called independent action. Short, sweet, and straight to the point with the name of that. He does have a few, I really do mean a few when I say that, other skills I could mention, but this section is already getting too crowded, so I'll save it for another time. Personality-wise, Archer was straightforward, and kind of abrasive, though not to an absolutely asinine degree. He was pretty much just blunt. If that makes any sense. It's not that he doesn't have a personality. Far from it. If he wanted to, he'd be annoyingly bratty, but most of the time he'd just get straight to the point. I honestly only found out I could talk to the projections of the people I fought on accident. It happened around the time I first started training, shortly after my second or third fight with Amiya-san, where I decided to use the room, but forgot to set it to the only battle mode instead of the default auto-adjust. The hour or so I spent just talking to the projection is far more embarrassing to admit than you'd think, but I'd say it helped more than just continuing to stay embarrassed about it will. Getting back on track, Archer is definitely someone who'd make an amazing mentor figure, even with his unique way of interacting. He really reminds me of my dad, but only if he had the attitude of a particularly feisty onion at times. If I could, I'd love to meet with the real Archer, and maybe even learn his true name. I know that's practically giving up your secret weapon for a servant, especially in a Holy Grail War, but the odds of one happening again, especially after the 5th Holy Grail War and the true and false Holy Grail Wars from around 8 years ago, is slim to none, especially with the Mages Association locking down on any magi that didn't operate directly out of the clock tower. The seals on my circuits is hard proof of that. I'm technically not completely out of options though, because the efforts made at Chaldea with their servant summoning has been improving, though I doubt I'd be able to go there anytime soon without giving up a lot of opportunities at UA. For now, it's not that big of a deal, but maybe in the future I'll have a chance. Next pay. I guess now's the time I finally do this, Kaken. My first entry on him is still something I pretty much fully agree with, but some of my opinions on him have changed. After everything with the USJ happened, we haven't talked much. We sit next to each other in class, and all of our families including the Hatsums still meet up so we can figure out stuff with the Bakugan, as well as just hang out in general. Despite that, we've only been growing distant as of late. It's probably because of the sports festival, but it still makes me salty, especially after all of the years he spent bullying me. With my saltiness towards him out of the way, I think it'd be best to start with his endurance. This is debatably his strongest category, only contested by his raw firepower. The best showcase for this would probably be the entire USJ incident. Not only was he able to fight the entire way through, but he used multiple strong attacks in quick succession, that's not even mentioning having the energy to have a Bakugan brawl afterwards. Adding on to that, he admitted that the problem with his quirk seriously hurting his arms has still been going on, meaning it almost certainly was there during the USJ incident. I can't speak for how bad it might actually be, but even if it was just a sting, that kind of thing could build up and start hurting even more as time passed. For that, I've got to give him a B, or even B+. Continuing, there's Kaken's quirk, Explosion. Compared to my previous entries where I've needed to make a ton of guesses, meaning the results were skewed and unable to be conclusive, I already have a decade of said guesses and theories. The official explanation of his quirk is that Explosion allows the user to excrete a nitroglycerin-like sweat from their palms and ignite it at will. That makes it seem a lot simpler than it actually is, something that's becoming a larger and even more destructive trend the more of these entries I make. Despite the weirdly ambiguous but also not ambiguous at all state of our friendship, I've had more than enough opportunities to actually test some of the theories I mentioned. I'll go over a few of those and the results now. First, and probably the most obvious, is it possible for him to release the sweat from anywhere else on his body and ignite it like he normally does? The testing on this was, and still is, inconclusive. After 2 weeks of trying and failing, we did manage to get a singular bead of the nitroglycerin-like substance to come out of his shoulder, but anything more than that was next to impossible. Next up, can he control the explosions at all after they're released? That actually did end up being possible, though with a few caveats. He can do that, but it requires such precise actions and timing, something that wouldn't really be viable unless he practiced daily for hours at a time in order to do it consistently. Honestly, this is up in the air after coming back to it after lunch, because I just remembered footage from one of Endeavor's fights right before he arrived at the USJ. He called it Flash Fire, Construct, and was able to make a bowl from his fire, and he made nunchucks right before that. Maybe if Kaken could learn how Endeavor did that, this theory might work even better. The last one I'll explain here is actually from about 2 months ago, right after the entrance exams, when Kaken asked me about the pain he felt in his arms and entire body when using his more powerful explosions. With the help of Kirishima, we were able to find a temporary solution by limiting the power he uses, but that won't hold long term. With the League of Villains still out there, who knows what else might happen? We can't sacrifice strength with people like Shigaraki on the loose. My initial assessment turned up with nothing but possible strain from quirk overuse, and Hatsum-san said there was nothing wrong even after a deep scan using nanites along with a full-body X-ray. After a bit of thinking and a few weeks of research, I think I've found a plausible reasoning as to why it might be happening, and it is kind of out there in terms of what it might entail. Actually, scratch that, I've literally spoken with beings from an entirely different dimension, have a classmate whose body acts as a gateway to another dimension, and another who literally controls things using her soul. This really isn't that out of this world. Yeah, no, that was a stupid joke. Getting back on track, I suspect this is a case of either premature quirk evolution, or some kind of mutation with his quirk factor. I've ruled out the latter, as Hatsum-san would have caught that if it were the case, and seeing as there was nothing wrong when he scanned Kaken, it would make absolutely no sense for it to have not been caught. The more likely, and much less disastrous, case is premature quirk evolution. This is a theory piggybacked off of the quirk doomsday theory, and Stephen Granger's decades of research into quirks as a whole, so I'll give a summary of those before moving on. The quirk doomsday theory is a theory created by Dr. Ujiko Daruma to study the rapid evolution of quirks, and the consequences unregulated quirk use could lead to. I personally think it's just a bunch of jargon that doesn't match the reality of quirks, but the main idea of quirk evolution is one that many specialists seem to agree with as reality. Quirks, while strictly biological from a purely science-based perspective, are in fact much more than that, as can be observed even within just my classmates. They grow and adapt to with the user on a level beyond what we could reasonably explain with science alone, pretty much like a sentient being. Based on that, I believe this is Kaken's quirk adapting to itself, trying to grow even stronger so that it can be of more use to himself. I suspect the pain he's feeling is a byproduct of his quirk adapting faster than his body can keep up, thus his quirk is trying to force his body to catch back up. Again, this is just a theory, and we'll have to wait and see what comes of it, but I have a feeling I might be right on the money. Alright, we're moving on to everything else now, kicking things back off with Kaken's strength. During the entrance exams, he was able to fight on equal footing with the Night Titan, the zero-pointer, deployed for the final test. The Titans should all be relative to each other in terms of strength by Principal Nedzu's own admission, so I should be able to estimate how strong it was based off of Giganto, the one I fought. Just a swing of Giganto's arm could wipe out a city block in the faux megacity the exam took place in, and one punch sent me flying to the edge of my test quadrant. Just a single step from it shook the entirety of the quadrant I was in, and the air pressure from its punches made me feel like I was fighting an A-rank kaiju from the United States. Furthermore, during the USJ incident, Kaken was able to vaporize the entirety of the conflagration zone with his howitzer impact, leaving nothing but a city-sized hole that reached deep into the earth. I heard they were planning on turning it into the cavern zone once the main structural repairs of the USJ were completed. Also in the USJ, with the aid of Cerberus, the three-headed dog companion he has which seems to be directly connected to his Quirk, and Yaoyorozu, along with the armor both of the Hatsums made for the both of us, he was able to create some kind of missile launcher, along with a new move he calls Cerberus-style, Burst Hound. Apparently it launched 3 different missiles. One to the downpour zone that helped Todoroki and Tokoyami, one that cleared the rubble from me crashing the ship from the shipwreck zone, and one more that helped turn the tides against Arius at the entrance. With all of that in mind, I think I'll give him a B+ for strength. It's lower than what I initially put for him, but the last measurement system was pretty inaccurate compared to the current system. Next is speed, and this is pretty easy to find. Kaken is fast, and his mobility in the air using his explosions to propel himself is pretty much unmatched by anyone else in the class other than possibly Todoroki or Ida. In the apprehension test, he scored just behind Ida and me, managing 2.60 seconds. He was also able to move fast enough to get on top of Sato's back in the class battle before most could even finish blinking. And moving back to Knight for a moment, he was more than capable of dodging swings of its sword, and even keeping pace with it while racing through their testing quadrant, both on the ground and in the sky. Despite what I've said here though, I don't think Kaken is that suited to long travel times in the air using his method of propulsion, but I could be wrong. It seems more useful in short bursts so he can quickly reposition. I'll have to ask him more about it, but I do have some ideas already starting to form. Back to the rating, he was also able to dodge and partially keep speed against the Nomu and Shigaraki. That's insanely impressive, considering both gave All Might trouble, but more so on the Nomu. Even being able to dodge something that powerful that fully intends to kill you is something that should not be taken lightly. Therefore, I'll be giving him a B here. I heard about Kaken going to the clock tower. Supposedly, he left about 6 months before I did, though I didn't see him at all. I suspect that whoever he was training with made sure he was constantly honing his skills, something that's abundantly clear with just a glance towards him. Instead of the overwhelming ocean I saw with Kurutakuin, Kaken's was more like a blazing wildfire of pure mana. It felt like I was face to face with a living volcano, ready to strike at anything that caught its fury. I could see traces of the same seal covering his circuit pathways though, so it seems like he didn't make it out before the Mages Association demanded everyone, but top-class magi get a seal placed on them. Maybe once Sage figures out how to remove it for me, I can do the same to everyone else in class who might be in the same boat. Sadly, Kaken declined every time I tried to get him to play the wargame, saying, "Stupid sheet like that is for pussies that aren't confident in their own skills. I don't need to play some shitty game to know I'm better than you extras. Take that as you will, I'm done trying." We're nearing the end, and it's finally time for the section I've been dreading. I'm probably just being really salty, and if Sage could she'd almost certainly be making fun of me for it, but I don't think I'll ever be able to accept the state of our friendship, if you can even call it that. I mean, the but hasn't even bothered apologizing for the 10 years of bullying and abuse he and his cronies put me through. They made my life a living hell, and I'll never forgive him for that, at least, that's what I want to say. Despite how horribly he's treated me for almost the entire time we've known each other, I'll never be able to hate him. I can only think of him as my first, and only childhood friend, the person who was the catalyst for my love of heroes and my dream to become one, the one person I can look to and call the brother I never had thanks to being an only child like him. I don't know what to think anymore. I could never hate him, but I also can't forgive him, not yet. Maybe there really is only one way we can settle this. On the stage the entire world will be watching. The sports festival. I'll make sure I make it to the finals, and I know he will too. There, hopefully I can get the answer I've wanted for so long. Next pay. With how hectic everything has been lately, especially training for the sports festival, I haven't had much time to sit back and think about what happened with the Bakugan. Thanks to Principal Nedzu and the UA staff, more pro heroes have joined in the search for the remaining 15 prototypes, but nothing's come of it yet. Even then, I can only bring myself to worry about Percival and Dragonoid. They're still recovering, and since I can use my quirk again without too much risk of injury, I've been supplying Percival with some of my quirk energy every day for the last week or so. I hope they wake up soon, it's all been so quiet without my partner around. This entry will, just like the last one, not follow the standard way of dealing out rankings. There are two reasons for this, other than the obvious detail that it's just explaining something, those being that the Bakugan are far too powerful for my current rankings, meaning I'd need to create a separate one just for them, and because I'd have to split it into 3 separate entries for Dirac, Dragonoid, and Percival. With that out the way, it's time to start with what the Bakugan actually are. Bakugan come from a world entirely separate from our universe, and possibly even beyond that, called Vestroia. From what Percival said, Vestroia is a sprawling collection of celestial landmasses floating in an endless void. Out of these islands, there are 6 that are supposedly bigger than the sun that house the main populations of all 6 attributes. The entire system is connected through railways and long stretches of land to one another, kind of like a Dyson sphere except as big as our observable universe. Bakugan themselves are more like energy spirits, utilizing attribute energy to fly, regenerate, and duel each other in something called a Bakugan brawl. A Bakugan brawl is just that, a brawl between Bakugan, but don't let the simple naming scheme fool you, these things are the real deal. On top of unique abilities that range from neutralizing barriers to strikes that cleave the sky, and the ability cards moves allow the Bakugan to do crazy things only comparable to the top 10 heroes in the entire world, they also possess monstrous physical strength. None of this is without its drawbacks though. Ability cards can only be used once per brawl, and back on Vestroia the Bakugan are severely limited in the actions they can take without them. Another big difference between Vestroia and our world for the Bakugan is the limit on how long they can battle in their true forms. Before manifesting here, Bakugan held a near limitless amount of attribute energy, meaning they could keep battling for as long as they wanted, but that's changed. Now they are limited by how much Quirk energy their partner can provide to keep going, though they do have a reserve that allows them to fight at full power for as long as it lasts, giving a small taste of what they could really do in their home world. But that's enough backstory. The true mystery of the Bakugan lies in how they came to our world. Even after a little over a month of researching, we still aren't completely sure about the process itself, but we do have a decent grasp over the basics. Through something we took to calling vestalization, someone with an emitter-type quirk is able to establish a connection between themselves and a Bakugan of an attribute with similar elements to each other. This entire process seems to require a medium capable of channeling both the attribute and quirk energy of both parties, meaning the only option for it is orichalcum, which just so happens to be exactly what the prototypes May created are made of. Ectoplasm Sensei theorized they could be energy spirits, a lesser-known yokai home to worlds far removed from our own, and it's definitely a plausible explanation, though it falls apart when put in context with everything else we know. If they truly were energy spirits, they wouldn't be able to interact with our world in the way they do based off of the myths surrounding the yokai, meaning it just can't be the correct explanation. Despite not being exactly correct, perhaps we may still be moving in the right direction. We're still looking into how exactly the Bakugan convert quirk energy to attribute energy, but a lot of that needs Dragonoid and Percival actually awake to continue, so it's a dead end for now. There was something else a few people mentioned during the private conference about me, Kaken, and Shigaraki that was slightly odd. Apparently, while the Bakugan were fighting, I seemed to be possessed by something calling itself an Arbiter of Aquos, and demanded everyone to stop interfering with the Bakugan brawl or it'd turn our planet into a hole in the universe. At this point I'm way too lost. My memory from then has a lot of holes. I remember throwing out Percival, but after that there's nothing until Kamaya-sensei and the other teachers showed up, before blacking out again pretty much immediately, so I'm not completely sure of anything after the brawl started. As of right now, that's all I or anyone else really knows about the Bakugan. More information will come once Dragonoid and Percival wake up, but until that happens we're still stuck far into the dark. I'll make sure to add more onto this as soon as I learn more. Next pay. Every day that's passed since the start of the school year, I've never actually felt like I'm getting any closer to knowing about the person behind the hero Hawks. In fact, I feel like I know even less about both. Because of how badly he was injured by the Nomu, Takami-sensei has been taking it easy and observing the class's training for the sports festival. I'm surprised both he and Eraserhead are able to stand at all, but I guess that goes to show how much tenacity you need to have to be a hero? Anyways, despite basically being forced to stop being a hero until he fully recovers, Takami-sensei seems to have withdrawn completely. He's not cold, but he's definitely not warm. I wonder what happened for such a dramatic change to happen in only a week? Starting off with his speed, Takami-sensei lives up to his nickname of the fastest hero. All Might may be faster, sure, but that's All Might. At the last iFest, he and a few other heroes, Ingenium, Isol, Ryukyu, Deliverer from South Korea, and Polaris from America, participated in a racing event to prove who was the fastest out of that group, and the results were surprisingly close. Ryukyu came in last, though she took it on the chin and kept her head high. Polaris came in fifth, though the distance between him and Isol, who came in third just barely beating out Ingenium, was crossing into the millimeters. After that the gap widened significantly, with Deliverer and Takami-sensei almost 5 paces ahead of everyone else. In the end, despite the heck of a fight Deliverer put up, Takami-sensei managed to beat him out, and he did it in style. He's also shown the ability to cross entire cities in seconds, and I remember him teaming up for a mission assigned by the IHA where he crossed the entirety of the USA in just a few minutes. That level of speed is absolutely insane. Here, an S works best. He might be more of a hit-and-run fighter, but the power behind Takami-sensei's strikes is nothing to scoff at. On more than one occasion he's been able to match villains with strength enhancement quirks blow for blow, even with said villains being able to flatten a building with a single punch or rip through steel with ease. Pair that with his overwhelming skill in various martial arts, but also being able to wield various weapons created using his feathers more than effectively, and you have a dangerous fighter on your hands. Another memorable showing of strength I remember comes from 2 years ago, right when I left for the clock tower. He, Endeavor, and a few other heroes took down a villain whose quirk let him turn into supersized sea creatures, even ones that were supposedly myth. The villain turned into a massive kraken as a last resort, and tore a massive chunk of earth out of the ocean floor to throw at the mainland. Before it even got close, Takami-sensei sped in front of it, caught it, and then kicked it hard enough for it to shatter. There are plenty of other things similar to this that he's done, but it'd take a bit too long to list. For now, I think an A is perfect for this category. Endurance is a place where Takami-sensei's shine slightly dims. He's able to weave through attacks from people on his level with ease, and he can take a good hit as well, but it's clear he's built more for quick, powerful strikes that don't leave him in one place for too long. That fact becomes abundantly clear when looking at the USJ incident. He and Eraserhead were able to dodge around Shigaraki and the Nomu's attacks for a good bit of time, but that's all they could really do. The combination of their quirks allowed them to score a few hits here and there, but it eventually ended the instant even a hint of fatigue began to show itself. Just one hit from the Nomu was enough to completely shatter the entire right side of Takami-sensei's body. It might not be the fairest comparison, but it is accurate. He just doesn't have the raw durability to withstand many hits from people stronger than him, and even for those close to him in strength he still has to rely on quick evasive maneuvers and dodges due to the simple fact he just didn't train to be that durable. Compared to your average person, he can still take many more hits before he fully goes down, but he definitely doesn't excel here like in the last two categories. With this in mind, I believe AB is the best ranking. It took a bit of convincing, but I was able to get Takami-sensei to play a few rounds of the war simulator with me, and I have to admit that I was completely outclassed. Every one of his strategies to beat me felt so far out of the box to me, that they weren't even viable in my mind. In the first game, it was nearly impossible to actually establish a hold in any of the key battlefields because I had what may as well have been a league of assassins hunt me for sport. It only took a few battles, and I was completely cut off from any resources, leaving me entirely defenseless. The second game only went worse. I was cautious of any secret assassins attacking me this time, but looking back on it, that's exactly what Takami-sensei wanted. I was so weary of sneak attacks and played defensively the whole game, allowing Takami-sensei to build up enough manpower that he was able to completely run through and decimate my entire army. After that, I was pretty determined to actually win, but it just turned into an embarrassing loss for me. I decided to take a few battles to build up a decent strike force that'd sneak around and destroy his commander as fast as possible, but then all that preparation was for nothing because I accidentally left my own commander undefended in some random resource field, and he was killed right in the middle of my strike force's first battle. He mentioned after the fact that all of these losses hold a valuable lesson in them, and that I should take the time to review them and see what actually happened as an extracurricular assignment before graduating from UA, but I just don't see what he's getting at. Maybe I should take a nap before doing any more analysis? Now that I'm rested, I think now's the time to focus on Takami-sensei's quirk, Fierce Wings. Fierce Wings gives the user a pair of bright red wings full of feathers they can control mentally. That's the official statement the HPSC put out for his quirk, something they're required to do for every hero registered under them. If you ask me, that rule is pretty stupid, and even though the explanations themselves don't give out much information, anyone with a good enough reason and keen eyes can find out more about each quirk with enough time. Luckily, there haven't been many villains or criminals that have put in the time and effort to discover the truth behind some of the heroes' quirks, but it's always a possibility no matter how unlikely. On top of being able to control his feathers mentally, Takami-sensei seems to be capable of changing their size, shape, and even sharpness easily, mostly using the ability to create a myriad of weapons he uses in fights. He can also use his wings to fly, his main form of travel. Something I've noticed when looking through all of the fights of his as well as my notes on him Fierce Wings is oddly simple. Not in the way of Ojiro or Usajiyama-sensei, but because of how he uses it. It seems like he's always aware that people are analyzing his fights, and purposefully limits more advanced applications of his quirk which he should be capable of. Other than his ability to manipulate his feathers in whatever way he wishes, Takami-sensei barely shows anything off. That doesn't mean he isn't flashy. Even when quickly defeating opponents, he always seems aware of where any recording cameras are, making sure to stand out even though he's not doing anything that could be considered flashy with his quirk, if that makes any sense. Whatever's up with that, it's keeping me from gleaning too much information about what he might be able to do with his quirk, and any theories I have are already proven disproven, or just too far out there, even for the theories I usually have. Takami-sensei seems like someone uniquely suited to use magecraft, and based off of his admitted usage during the USJ incident during one of our war simulator matches, my hunch is probably right. Ever since my sense for mana began slowly coming back thanks to Sage, I feel this intense but subdued pressure coming from Takami-sensei, like I'm in the sights of an apex predator that's silently observing my every move until it gets bored and leaves, or until it gets hungry and chooses me for lunch, whichever comes first. I try to ignore it whenever he's around, but I always get an unshakable chill down my spine whenever he looks at me, and right after that the pressure lets up. I think he's aware, or he thinks I have good instincts, but either way I don't think I'll ever get used to that feeling. Like I mentioned at the start of this entry, Takami-sensei is becoming more and more reserved every day that passes, almost like something big is happening and he's trying to separate himself as fast as possible before it all goes downhill. I don't really know, no matter what I try, I can never seem to get a good read on him, like I said in the section on Fierce Wings. He seems aware of everything, and puts himself out like he wants to soak up the spotlight, but behind that is something deeper that I can't grasp at all. He's elusive like a ghost, slippery like an eel, loud, silent, kind of narcissistic, and humble all at the same time, like he's constantly switching to different personalities, so he doesn't slip up, or to make others do so. I've never dealt with anything like this, even at the clock tower. Lord Elmeloy-sensei was and still is prickly, sure, but that was pretty one note, and he has a much softer side to him once you get to know him. Gray, or Svin are the only two people I can compare him with, but even they made the reality behind their personalities pretty clear right off the bat before we got more acquainted. Why do the people I interact with have to be so difficult sometimes? In conclusion, Takami-sensei is dangerous and sly, almost like an assassin biding his time. His hit-and-run tactics in fights are what truly set him apart from other heroes, along with his mind-boggling speed. On top of that, the way he uses his quirk is confusing, probably on purpose, and makes it difficult to grasp its full capabilities. In combination with his spy-like personality, it's almost impossible to truly get meaningful information unless he gives it to you himself, in which case that's just him revealing a card he's already played long before. At the end of the day though, he's still a person behind the hero hawks. Next pay. It's crazy to think that who I thought was just a random girl, turned out to be the current head of the Tosaka family, the bloodline I come from. I guess I'll have to start referring to her as Tosaka-sama now, huh? Elmeloy-sensei probably did that on purpose now that I think about it, but even then it's a small world. Thinking back to what J.W. Greed said and also the fact that Tosaka-sama is said to be around the same age as Mom, I wonder if they all knew each other? Looking at my previous entry on her and my notes about the fights I had with her hard light projection, I really downplayed Tosaka-sama by a pretty big margin. So to amend that, let's start with just how strong she truly is. The statement I made back then about her incredible usage of reinforcement still stands. Her striking power in combination with her Bajiquan martial arts goes up at least 2 ranks with it active. That doesn't mean her base strength is lacking though. From being able to crater an inlaid brick floor with one punch, to obliterating small chunks of a mountainside casually, Tosaka-sama really is no joke. And considering that was her weakened by a significant amount thanks to the training room, on top of having much less experience and without a large portion of the strength she would have as she got older, I really don't want to fight her now. Don't let her smaller stature fool you either. She may be shorter than me, but the power behind her strikes hurt a lot more than most people could even believe. Going back to what Greed said after that whole fiasco of recruiting me to the Gemstone Hearts, which I still don't believe actually happened, or that I accepted. Supposedly whenever he and Mom fought when they were younger it always ended in a draw, and Greed has only grown stronger since then, but he still thinks it'd be the same if they fought now, and Tosaka-sama must be at least as strong as Mom for her to be the head of the family. I've never actually seen Mom fight either, so I guess this is a moot point without a proper baseline to establish for them, but I think what I was getting at still stands. Either way, All of this makes me even more certain that Tosaka-sama falls in the range of D+ as the lowest she could possibly be, to a max of A+ as she is in the present. That range goes up to C and S, with reinforcement. This is the biggest range I've done for these revisions, mostly because this is the first time I've actually taken account how strong the person would be in the present. Since the only other one with a range is Amiya-san, I think I can get away with putting his here for now while I go back to update it with this in mind. So, Amiya-san's updated range would be D at the minimum and S at his maximum as of this point in time. My reasoning for the massive jump is rooted deeply in his magecraft, along with the general inexperience he had when I fought his projection. With how many years have passed, it's a guarantee that he'd improve massively, and I think he could possibly reach the level of the top-tier pro heroes with that alone. Her speed is another place where I think my brain downplayed her from general exhaustion, and I just never bothered to correct it. It would have been inaccurate even then with my flawed grading system, but it wouldn't have been as atrocious. In all honesty, I did beast her in our first fight back then, but that's leaving out the important context that the fight lasted for almost 2 hours. She was a really tenacious and ferocious opponent, and there were plenty of moments where I would have lost against her if not for us both being exhausted. She couldn't really get tired as she was just a hard light projection, but the training system did a really good job of simulating her limits in battle. Among those moments where I would have lost, a majority of them were due to the fact that she was just faster than me. She was able to cross long distances between the two of us in just a few seconds, and evade a good portion of my punches and kicks even quicker. I swear I remember her creating an afterimage at one point. Maybe that was just a spell, but my instincts are telling me that was with pure speed, willpower, and a desire to kick my butt. Even apart from that, she was able to react to attacks from Archer, Lancer, Rider and Berserker in one of the free-for-all fights El Meloy-sensei made me participate in, and considering just how insanely powerful and fast servants are, that just further cements how crazy strong she is. The ranges this time around should easily reach C+ to A at her maximum. Her endurance was actually pretty accurate in my last entry, meaning I should be fine just extrapolating further from that. Like I mentioned in the speed section, she's a really tenacious fighter, something that likely comes from her feisty personality and Bajikwan martial arts. Thanks to her control of the prior mentioned martial arts, Tosaka-sama is very effective at directing her energy to make sure she doesn't tap out early in a fight even with the explosive power needed to properly utilize the benefits of Bajikwan arts. She's also a master at lessening impact from strikes that she can't outright dodge thanks to her speed. Even taking a blow head-on isn't really an issue considering reinforcement, and she's guaranteed to tank through at least a few direct hits before tapping out. All of that is without mentioning her insane stamina recovery. After just a few seconds, Tosaka-sama is able to get back into the fight even after a particularly draining engagement. With that in mind, the range I have for her is B to S, and then B+ to S+ with reinforcement. Like I've been saying, Tosaka-sama really is a feisty personality. She's haughty to the point of pure narcissism, and sometimes becomes a tsundere out of nowhere. It's confusing, and endearing when she's not too narcissistic. In some ways she reminds me of a mom, like a lot, to the point where it seems like they were childhood friends or something. She's apparently pretty bad with technology, and mom is too. Only mom has gotten better, at least when it comes to computers and phones, but it still comes through with things like kiosks or the like. At least when around Mitsuki-san or Greed, some of the haughtiness I witnessed with Tosaka-sama comes out too. In one of my conversations with Tosaka-sama's projection, she revealed that her limited knowledge of technology came from spending most of her childhood practicing magecraft, and because of that she just didn't have the chance to learn. Perhaps if I can meet the real her sometime, I can teach her about some of the stuff she missed out on? That sounds like a lot of fun, and getting to know even more about the Tosaka family from someone who is a major part of its history directly instead of through history books will be even more enjoyable. Tosaka-sama's intelligence is also nothing to scoff at. She might not be good with technology, but when it comes to anything other than that, you can be assured she's your go-to person for the job. El Meloy-sensei mentioned that she and Amiya-san helped him out with an investigation or two a few years before I arrived at the clock tower, and the ones she worked on were nearly perfect in every detail. On top of that, she can easily navigate a fight, identifying an opponent's weaknesses and coming up with more than enough strategies to defeat them with just 2 or 3 exchanges. She's kind of like a mix between Kendo and Yaoyorozu in this aspect, and that's probably the best comparison I can think of to describe her. I wish I could know more about her though. It'd be so much easier to gauge exactly where she is if I could meet her in person. From what I've observed, Tosaka-sama seems to have some form of a telekinesis quirk, which is in line with something I'd expect the Tosaka family to have. The former head, Tosaka Tokiomi, had a similar quirk, only it worked on a smaller scale. She mostly used it to keep hold of the jewels she used for the Tosaka family's signature jewel magecraft, giving her finer control over how she used it in battle since she wouldn't have to take her focus away from the fight in order to grab another jewel. That alone made her much more dangerous, and it seemed Magi would agree based on what I read about battles with the Tosaka family. Before quirks were a factor in battles between Magi, many noted that the biggest weakness of jewel magecraft was having to constantly be aware of what jewels you used, how many you have left and how accessible they were in battle, meaning the biggest opening for defeating a user of it would be the moment they reached for a new jewel. The development of telekinesis quirks almost completely eliminated that weakness, and it shows. Tosaka-sama's main forms of magecraft, as I've mostly mentioned, are reinforcement, jewel magecraft, Gander, and supposedly other curse arts, healing magecraft, memory manipulation, and creating bounded fields. Starting with the least familiar, there's curse arts and Gander. I don't know a lot of curse arts, as that was one of the other things Sensei decided to let me research on my own, but I do know they can be incredibly dangerous, Gander being a prime example. Other than Bajiquan, Gander is Tosaka-sama's main form of engagement, mostly for long to medium-range encounters. It's incredibly powerful, able to obliterate medium-sized boulders with ease, though she can control how potent its effects are at will. Next is healing magecraft, which is exactly what it sounds like. It allows whoever uses it to heal minor injuries with a slight amount of strain, and even reattaching or potentially regrowing a limb with enough OD and mana poured into the attempt. After that are bounded fields, a form of magecraft which directly affects a designated space. It works by creating or knitting, whichever you prefer, a barrier around an area which completely cuts it off from the outside world, then installing a certain effect either on the field itself or the area inside of it. This is the thing that hides the clock tower, Chaldea, and a few other important locations from non-Magi. I've already explained reinforcement, so I'll skip it, and memory manipulation since the latter is pretty self-explanatory. Last but not least after those two, is jewel magecraft, something I have hands-on experience using. It, again, is kind of self-explanatory, you just use jewels, but there is a bit of deeper understanding to be had. It works by taking jewels of your choice, and transferring magical energy, mana, into it, allowing it to act as a pseudo-mystic code or magic crest, turning said jewel into a one-time use spell ready to use just by breaking it. There are way too many uses for specific jewels that would inflate this entry way too much, so I'll keep things short by ending it here. It's all very interesting though, and I'm considering making a separate entry dedicated to exploring all of its uses in detail, but I'll probably be too busy to do that anytime soon. After all of this, it's safe to say that my previous entry on Tosaka-sama was far too short, just like all of them from back then, and didn't do her nearly enough justice. I hope this did better, but alas, I don't have a perfect memory, and I haven't met any other members of the Tosaka family other than my mom, so there's definitely room to improve. I am sure that this did its job to highlight just how powerful the current head is, as well as how skilled she is. Attempting at all to fight her without ample preparation, knowledge, or sufficient strength at maximum one rank below what I've given her here might as well be a death sentence. Even then, that just makes me even more excited to fight her one day. Next pay. Out of every hero I've analyzed, Usagiyama-sensei is probably the one who stumps me the most. Not because she's super mysterious like Takami-sensei or Kamihara-sensei, or that she has some major secret that she's hiding from the entire world like Yagi-sensei, but that's exactly what makes her so interesting. Despite not having the most complex or powerful quirk out there, Usagiyama-sensei is one of the strongest people out there, and that isn't hyperbole. It's refreshing not having to constantly go out of my way just to get deeper insights into people, and her brash personality definitely doesn't affect that. Usagiyama-sensei was probably the easiest entry I've made since I started this new format, if only because she was more than happy to help me as long as she was able to make a shit ton of copies of it and your scoring guidelines, so some of these villains can get fucking educated. I have no idea why she'd give the villains she's trying to fight even more data to use when going up against her, but who am I to judge? Even then, I'm going to try and talk her down. Some of this stuff could lead to really bad situations if it gets out. As per Usagiyama-sensei's request, I'll start off with her strength. She may not be at the pinnacle in terms of raw power, but that doesn't mean she's too far down from it. Just as a baseline, she should be comparable if not outright stronger to heroes like Hawks and Ryukyu, who I've given an A and A+ respectively. The latter is an average of her strength rankings without fully transforming and fully transformed, which have an A and S individually. Notable accomplishments that aid in justifying her placement in this area include shattering the shell of an adult mountain tortoise with a single kick, an A-rank monster that's shell is supposed to be 3 times tougher than tungsten, and killing it, generating enough force while underwater to rupture a ravine roughly 500 kilometers below surface level after kicking a villain who tried to destroy the tectonic plates Japan is located on, and many more absurd things on that level. Overall, she more than deserves an S in strength. Though it continues, the absurdity is toned down significantly when it comes to her speed. She should be slower than Hawks and a few others in Japan's top 10 by a sizable margin, but certainly not enough to seem slow in comparison to others. That is further backed up by not only her own words, but also from what she's done in her 8 years since becoming a pro hero. Just 2 years ago, she was able to react fast enough to dodge an attack from Photon Man, a minor villain whose quirk allowed him to turn parts of his body into pure light particles point blank. Adding even more onto this, during the USJ incident she was attacked by League of Villains members Arius and Kurogyri. In her fight with Arius, she effortlessly dodged the lasers the villain fired using his quirk, which seemed to have properties similar to light if melting through multimeter-thick reinforced steel was any indicator, and towards the end of the incident she fought to a standstill against Kurogyri after the latter used his teleportation quirk to redirect a stray blast from Dirac. A testament to both Kurogyri's insane reaction speed, and Usagiyama-sensei's agility and crazy athletic skill and ability, considering she dodged an attack that even Dragonoid and Percival almost got hit with by doing a continuous string of backwards handsprings while Kurogyri forcefully redirected it towards her. With that in mind, I think I'll give her an A+ here. Moving on is her endurance, the place I personally believe she excels the most in. I already mentioned her fight with Kurogyri towards the end of the USJ incident, so I'll avoid listing it here, but that doesn't mean there's nothing to justify her ranking, far from it. About 4 years ago, she and a few other heroes faced off against a villain who called himself Archlord Mayhem, a powerful man that was apparently a remnant of the MLA or Meta Liberation Army from year-long past. According to his own words, Mayhem was put into stasis just a year before the fall of the MLA in order to accumulate even more power than he already possessed, but because there was no one to free him he had been trapped for over 200 years until some mysterious doctor finally released him. He had the remarkable power to attack and defend himself instantaneously by bending space itself, and a single hit was enough to kill even seasoned pro heroes like the late-mentioned Flare from America, and gravely injure Yoroi Musha, putting him out of action for nearly a year. Despite all of that, Usagiyama-sensei decided to engage head-to-head with him, and she eventually defeated him with her signature move Luna Fall, only for Mayhem to take his own life to avoid custody. That aside, Usagiyama-sensei was able to avoid each of the villain's attacks just an instant before they would hit her, and even after multiple attacks clipped her body, taking large chunks out of her body and even getting stabbed through the gut with a large stone, she pushed through every bit of pain she was in with a tenacity that could only be described as insane. Even that is downplaying her a lot with all the pain she's been through and countless attacks that would have taken out almost anyone else, like when a villain tried to flatten her with a gravitational well that output almost 200x Earth's gravity, which she was able to walk off casually, or the time an Ashen Land Eater, a massive S-rank monster that eats land and lives in the core of the Earth, punched her multiple times hard enough to cause earthquakes that were felt from Australia to the UK, and she was able to keep fighting long enough to drive it back to the core, the entire battle lasting almost 24 straight hours. It's safe to say that Usagiyama-sensei is more than qualified for an S+ here, if only because of her maniacal tenacity. Like has been customary with my analysis, I challenged Usagiyama-sensei to a few rounds of Zenowar in order to gauge her strategic thinking, along with ask her a few questions to get a better understanding of her personality. Of the 3 games we played, I won 2 and lost 1. The first game happened after a few earlier games of practice so she could get used to the game, and I won. Her initial strategy was to throw everything she had at me all at once, which led to a quick loss. After seeing that she couldn't just play like how she fights, Usagiyama-sensei got a lot more serious and put effort into making sure her strategic planning was foolproof, allowing her to beat me after I carelessly overextended to capture a node, allowing her to systematically dismantle my entire army. The third match was a lot closer, but since I had a feel for how she strategized I was able to barely come out on top. She put a lot of effort into building up enough power so that she could eventually stage an all-out attack that would bring me down, and I did something similar. It was only my greater experience with the mechanics of Zenowar that allowed me to overcome her then, and it was still hard to win because of how tenacious she was. It's fair to say that a person's personality plays a massive role in how they strategize, and even more their mindset. Usagiyama-sensei didn't want to lose in any of those last 2 games, which drove her to adapt and improve rapidly. I might need to look more into this phenomenon, it's very interesting just talking about it, and even more to observe it up close. Usagiyama-sensei is pretty much exactly how she portrays herself as a hero: brash, confident in herself, competitive, and everything else. But that's not all there is to her, just like everyone else. Just talking with her for around an hour was enough to see that. She's kind and caring where it counts, and protecting anyone who might be in danger is always at the front of her mind when fighting villains as Maruko, even if she does find fighting super enjoyable. According to her, she became a hero so she could provide for her younger sister after their mother's passing, and hearing that was enough to make my admiration for her shoot up even further than her protecting us during the USJ incident. I wish I had a reason as selfless as that for why I want to be a hero, but mine is pretty surface level in comparison. Either way, just thinking about how hard she's working every day to help her sister live a comfortable life has me pumped up. I'm gonna go train for 6 hours. Let's do this. Oddly enough, Usagiyama-sensei can't use magecraft whatsoever. I even asked her if she could use deviation, but she told me she couldn't use that either. She's one of the main people I'd think could use one of those powers, but she said she was born without a body capable of having magic circuits, and no matter how many times she tried there was no way for her to awaken her whatever her origin might be. The bitterness in her tone was more than enough to tell me she didn't like not having either, but when I confronted her about it, she just said she has a few tricks up her sleeve. Whatever that means. Just to make sure, I tried to sense if she had any traces of magical energy in her body, but there wasn't even a speck. She was just a void of nothingness to my eyes. Her quirk, Rabbit, is pretty simple to grasp, kind of like Ojiro's, but there's something about just how simple they both are that I can't wrap my head around. Rabbit gives Usagiyama-sensei the features of a rabbit, meaning ears, tail, enhanced senses, and immense physical strength in her legs. Like I said though, there's something off about how simple her quirk is. It's almost the same feeling I get when thinking about One for All, but it's hard to explain it even in writing. Could it really just be her quirk and training that makes her so strong? I can't just confront her over something this small though, no matter how much I want to, because it'd just make me seem crazy. Crazy like I was in a rubber room with rats. That aside, her quirk really is simple, but that doesn't mean it's something to scoff at. One wrong move, and you might just end up with a face full of rabbit's foot. Maybe I should tone down on the puns. The weird feeling I have about her quirk aside, Usagiyama-sensei is a strong fighter and dangerous opponent. With enough time, she might just be able to beat All Might in contest of pure strength, but who knows? Either way, the best way to defeat her would be an attack that can take her out in a single hit, even if that hit only clips her. Be wary of her legs and what moves she might do, but also pay attention to the rest of her body. She may mostly attack with her legs, but she's a fighter trained in multiple martial arts. You can imagine what might happen should she catch you off guard with a punch.
Okay, sadly the chapter is over, and if you enjoyed the video just leave a like, and subscribe with post notification, so when the next chapter is ready, you will be notified. Okay, see you in the next video. Bye.